Good evening. The special meeting of the Annapolis City Council for Monday, July 25th, 2016 will be called to order at 7:05 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Littman, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the night that this council is scheduled to vote on the APF school capacity ordinance, I think it is the perfect opportunity for us to thank the teachers we've each had in our lives that have brought us to this council. For me, I remember Mrs. McLean, who helped guide me in high school to lead the Future Business Leaders Club, Professor Turner in college, who helped draw out my passion for protecting the environment, and one of my most inspirational professors, the late Mark Feldman, who reinforced the importance of doing for others as he led my law school's clinic's effort to help black families in Baltimore who had lead paint on the windows, young children in the home, and landlords who refused to follow the law. Just as these teachers helped me, I am sure that each of you have similar stories and people that inspired you. So to all of these teachers, we should now say thank you. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Pantelidis.
Present.
Alderman Budge. Alderman Payon.
Present.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles.
Present.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Littman.
Present.
Alderman Kirby.
Present.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our first item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Had a couple of requests come in at the last minute, so if you all would entertain this, I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda to remove GT 117, the DNET budget reorganization, and GT 317, the transfer from Department of Public Works salaries to benefits, and the quarterly update from HACA. They informed us earlier that they wouldn't be able to make it this evening.
Just as a point of question, why are the GTs coming off?
I'll let the finance director, but they brought it up to me earlier today that they still need some work.
Okay.
Yeah, after a little bit more review of the detail, there were some allocations that weren't quite right, and I thought it beneficial to remove both of them, and then we'll resubmit once the numbers are tied out.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is a presentation from the Annapolis Rotary Club on the 71st Annual Crab Feast at the Navy Stadium on August 5th, 2016.
I'm sorry. They're just doing a presentation. You invite them to the table.
Okay.
The crab in the room.
Good evening, Mayor Mike Pantelidis, City Council members, and ladies and gentlemen. I am Vienna Lorendi with the Annapolis Rotary. We are presenting the largest crab feast in the world, at least one of the largest, at the Navy Stadium on August 5th. It's our 71st annual crab feast, and it's all you can eat. And it's not only crabs, it's male, large male ones, all you can eat. It's corn, pulled pork, hot dogs, beverages, desserts, et cetera, and it's all in the shade. And the best part is that everything is, all proceeds go to charity. So we generate about $60,000 every year for local charities. So if you can save $10 if you purchase your ticket before August 5th. It's $65, and at the gate it's $75. So you have to hurry up because we sell out every year. And it's a wonderful, wonderful event. And this is the first year we have our mascot, Queen Claudia. Yay, Claudia. Thank you, everyone. all you can eat and drink. Thank you, Mayor Mike.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The next item is a ceremonial item, the swearing in of Arjan Van Andel to the Transportation Board.
If you could join me at the front. All right. So one of the things we have going on in the city is we have a number of boards and commissions. People are so generous with their time and volunteer. They're not paid. It's a lot of late nights in hot rooms like this. So one of the things we thought we'd do is start swearing in some of the members at council meetings and also do that for our public safety officials. So we have some new firefighters later so people can see the ones that are serving. So we're going to swear you in right now. So I state your name.
Arjan Van Andel. I, Arjan Van Andel.
All right. Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of Member of Transportation Board according to the Constitution and laws of this state and the Charter and Code of the City of Annapolis. Congratulations. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, more ceremonial items on the agenda, swearing in of two firefighters, Jonathan Riff and Vincent Lee.
All right. If they could join us at the front, please. Good. John. Vincent, pleasure. All right. All right. Okay, even better. Thank you. All right. So we got the great pleasure of swearing in two of our new firefighters. If you could raise your right hand, please. I state your name. Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of Member of the Fire Department according to the Constitution and laws of this state and the Charter and Code of the City of Annapolis. Congratulations.
So Mayor, Council, and community, I'd like to introduce you to our newest Annapolis firefighters, Jonathan Riff comes to us from Washington, D.C. Fire Department with 10 years experience. And Vincent Lee comes to us from the Anne Arundel County Fire Department with 2 years experience. Let's give them a nice Annapolis warm welcome. Chief Stokes wanted to be here tonight. He's a little under the weather. He congratulates you as well. And they have a little presentation that they would like to.
So Vincent and I decided to do a little something for our instructor that trained us through 4 grueling weeks. So we got him a little plaque. It's not much, but he was there for us and able to pass on his knowledge and experience, and we greatly appreciate that.
So even though firefighters that come here are previously trained, once they get here, they have to understand the Annapolis way. We've been doing this for about 5 years, and we've only had one certified instructor to get all these folks through, and that's Firefighter First Class Dave McGill. So, Rifes, excuse me, picture time.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The next item on tonight's agenda is a City Council proclamation for the Recreation and Parks Month, July 2016.
Director Morris could join me in the front. This month is National Recreation and Parks Month, and we have a proclamation here I'm going to read for you, and this is Michael Morse. For those of you who don't know, he's our Director of Recreation and Parks, and we stole him all the way from Texas to come here on a national search, and it's been, what, about a year? Year and a half. Right? Time flies by when you're having fun. So whereas recreation and parks programs are an integral part of our communities and through this country, and whereas our recreation and parks are vitally important to establishing and maintaining a quality of life in our community, ensuring the health of our citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas recreation and park programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreational services for all of those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also provides the mental and emotional health of all of our citizens. And I'm going to throw in a shameless plug here. We were #1 in Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, and I want to thank Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell-Charles for representing us at the White House. So recreation and parks goes a big way in winning those awards. And whereas recreation and parks are the fundamental to the environmental and well-being of our community. Now, therefore, I, Michael John Panelides, Mayor of the City of Annapolis, do hereby proclaim this month to be Recreation and Parks Month in 2016. Congratulations.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for recognizing the Recreation and Parks Department. I want to thank the staff of the Recreation and Parks Department for all the hard work they put into providing opportunities for all of our citizens to enjoy, whether it's a recreational facility or a program. So we encourage you all to be healthy, to be active, and enjoy the amenities we have for you. So thank you very much. We have 43 parks, yes.
I didn't realize how many we had. They're all listed on the website. So when people say, oh, there's not a park by my house, there probably is and you don't know about it. So shameless plug for the website. All right. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Sorry. Next on the agenda is a City Council citation for Dewan Gay.
All right, if Alderman Kirby could join me at the front.
This young man, Mr. Gay, 2 weeks ago, led a march for solidarity through the streets of Annapolis on one of those very hot days, such as today was. And he literally organized, with some help, hundreds of people, while municipalities all across our country is ripe with all kind of strife. He led this march on his own for solidarity here in the city of Annapolis. It's to those ends that I feel that he's very worthy of the citation that the mayor and my colleagues are going to bestow upon him tonight. We're just one municipality, but when we got citizens this young in our town that's willing to step forth for racial harmony and take that harmonious approach to us all being better people, it's going to make the entire world better. City Council citation, Dewan Gay. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you the City Council citation in recognition of your selfless dedication to the citizens of Annapolis. We applaud and thank you for your strong community commitment and demonstrated leadership in organizing the March for Solidarity on the 15th of July. We commend your efforts in representing One Annapolis and believe your dedication is an outstanding example of how all residents can make our city stronger and more resilient through caring and responsible actions. Given under our hands and the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis, this 25th day of July, 2016. Mayor Michael J. Panelides and the entire City Council. Thank you.
Thank you for the award. Thank you very much for the award. And I'm just going to very quickly say one of my favorite quotes that has a lot to do with what's going on right now, and that is, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And I can understand for a lot of the older people in the communities and then the city, they've been working very, very hard and very, very long for this, and the fatigue is catching up with them, but now is not the time to quit. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, but let's not quit right now. It's just the beginning. Thank you very much.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next on tonight's agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports by the city committees.
Is there any alderperson that would like to present a report? Alderman Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to report on the Environmental Matters Committee. The committee met in successive committees along with the Economic Matters Committee and the Rules Committee this past Thursday to go through the very long and very detailed Forest Conservation Act. And I want to express my appreciation and the fact just how impressed I was by everyone's engagement, by the amount of work that city staff put in, the amount of work that my colleagues put in. The working group that included Alderman Budge, Alderwoman Finlayson, Alderman Arnett, and I put a lot of time in advance to get us to the ordinance. But the council as a whole, I think, was very patient as we worked through 22 various issues, some of them leading to amendments, some of them not. And I just think it was a very impressive effort. Often the amount of time that it takes to get through legislation is frustrating, but I think this is a good example where everyone's involvement was beneficial. And just to update everybody where we are, the various amendments all passed unanimously by the 7 voting members of the various committees. So that's 7 out of 7. The amendments are now being sent to the Department of Natural Resources from the state to get their pre-approval of all those amendments. We hope that when we come back from our August recess that we'll have that confirmation, and the very big assumption that we do, I think we'll be prepared to vote on it in the first meeting in September. Thank you.
I look forward to it, and I ran into the Secretary of DNR at the Tallest Crab Feast, and it's high on their agenda, so I thank Governor Hogan for making his department heads available to us. Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee met several times last month. We met first on July 14th, where we agreed to recommend favorably the 0816, which has to do with business licenses, taxes, and regulations. We also agreed to recommend favorably the peddlers, hawkers, and itinerant merchants fees. We met on July 18th in conjunction with another one of our council committees and postponed consideration of the Forest Conservation Act in the interest of time. We did, however, agree to recommend favorably granting a waiver of the water connection fees for the Samaritan House. And finally, on July 21st, where we met with 2 other committees of this council to consider the Forest Conservation Act, and we unanimously agreed to recommend approval to the council as a whole.
Thank you. Alderman Budge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The Transportation Committee met on July 19th and considered a number of pieces of legislation. The 01916, the traffic impact analysis, we recommended favorably to the council. R2216, a resolution concerning the annexation of Annapolis Neck Road property. We considered, following some testimony from the former city attorney, the current city attorney, and counsels for the various properties, and determined that the best course of action was to recommend that unfavorably to the council. And we'll be hearing more about that later on this evening.
I don't think they can hear you.
We considered 3 other resolutions related to annexations, decided to postpone those while the attorneys for the city and the properties discussed items related to that legislation. And finally, we discussed 02616, extending the hours of residential parking districts on certain streets in districts 3 and 4. After discussion and receiving additional input from members of the public that were in attendance, the committee adopted some amendments and then postponed further action on the bill so that the communities could consider the implication of the amendments and report back to the committee. I recommend anyone who is interested in this matter to look at those amendments either on the city website or contact me and I'll send you a copy. And we'll take the matter up again at our meeting on September 20th.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. The Public Safety Committee met on Monday, July 18th. We took up the legislation 02416, snow emergency routes. We gave a favorable recommendation to that legislation. Also 026, which is extending hours in parking districts 3 and 4, another favorable recommendation. We had a discussion or heard from the police chief. He gave us an update on body cameras with the potential timeline for implementing body cameras, and he mentioned the 3 vendors that the department is now looking at for consideration. We also heard from Chief Priestoop that our crime stats are, well, our crime numbers are at the lowest level in 10 years, violent crimes. And so one of the questions asked was about a homicide, and I think he said 90% of our homicides have been solved very shortly after they were committed. We also heard an update from the Office of Emergency Preparedness on the Zika virus. Our health department is having discussions around the county with what we should be doing. There have been 6 cases in Anne Arundel County thus far. I believe none in the city, but tips are being distributed as to how we can protect ourselves. The public safety team also had a dialogue after the public safety meeting on public safety, policing, and racial issues in the city. And I'd like to first thank my colleagues on the public safety team, as well as Alderman Budge, Arnett, and Kirby for attending that meeting. We had a full house, and it was a community dialogue. So we heard concerns, but we also heard ideas and suggestions on how we can be working better with the community. That was the first of several dialogues. The next step will be to look at some of those suggestions and see how we can put them into practice. So I'd like to thank everybody in the community who came out that evening to just listen and or participate. We appreciate it. The next meeting of the Public Safety Committee will be Monday, September 19th at 5 o'clock here in Council Chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Next on the agenda are comments by members of the general public.
All right. We have 5 people signed up to speak today. The first is Jessica Packler, Don Lamb Minor, Ellie Tierney. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jessica Packler. Can you hear me? Is that on? My name is Jessica Packler. I live at 506 President Street in Annapolis in Eastport. Thank you, Mayor Panelides and aldermen and women, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to speak quickly about 2 things. One is regarding the Peddler's License Bill 0816. This bill is a complicated one that affects many throughout the city. Many amendments have been offered, and you will hear and vote on them tonight. So many, in fact, that most of your constituents, or maybe it's just me, don't really understand what is being voted on. Transparency is lacking. I ask you to please make sure, as you consider this bill, that all unintended consequences have been discussed and that the will of all of your constituents have been taken into account. The current law is confusing, but replacing it with a more confusing bill that does not remedy many of the current issues does not serve our city well. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I just want to make sure that unintended consequences throughout the city are taken care of. The main reason I'm here tonight, though, is regarding the Adequate Public Facilities Bill. You've heard me up here for this before. The critics of this bill make many important points. The town center should not have been exempted from the county APFO. Changing the demographics play a large part in the current enrollments and overcrowding of the city schools. The county school system make the major decisions about school funding, construction, and use. All of these things are true, and not one of them is a reason for you to not vote for adding schools to the city's Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. Even if our schools were in perfect condition, below capacity, and performing highest in the state, you should still pass this bill. As it is, that isn't the case. But that is not the point with this bill. This bill will not fix the current overcrowding. It will not change the county policy towards funding, and it will not adjust the current demographics. It cannot, and the city cannot, do any of those things. The only thing that the city can and does control that directly affects our students and our schools is development within city limits. That is what this bill does and is why you should pass it. It is the city's job to ensure that development within the city is responsible development that takes into account school capacity, just as it does roads, sewers, and other infrastructure. You would not consider allowing a project to be built within the city without ensuring that these were adequate. Why would you allow it without ensuring school space is adequate? This ordinance will simply put into place similar provisions that the county has regarding development as it relates to schools. That if a school is overcrowded, development cannot occur until mitigation occurs or 6 years pass. This is not an anti-development law. It is a responsible development law. It is, in fact, exactly what the developers and certain members of the council asked for the last time this issue came up, an APFO that matched the counties. This is what was requested by business and is what you should pass today. Even if a school is totally closed, a developer only has to wait 6 years. That isn't a long time in the development world, but it is an entire elementary school career for a child. AACPS is not a city-funded agency, and the city has no management oversight. But AACPS students are city residents, and it is your responsibility to represent and protect them. These are our city residents, our children, our future voters, and our taxpayers attending these schools and having our children attend these schools. They only get one chance at an education and deserve the best chance that we can give them. It is your duty as our elected representatives to take action and support our children. City kids deserve the same playing field as those in the county. Please add schools to the APFO so they can have that. Please support and pass this bill.
My name is Don Lamb Minor, and I live at 107 Northwest Street here in the city of Annapolis. I'm here today with gratitude, actually. I'm here to thank the council, the mayor, and his administration for having faith in the Inner West Street Association to put on our Dining Under the Stars, or Dinner Under the Stars. You know, it took a lot of courage on your part to make that happen. It took a lot of courage on the departments, the Public Works Department, on the Police Department to make this happen, and yet they invested enough faith in us to make sure that we could have this event. And I need to tell you, it's been an overwhelming success. And so I'm here tonight on behalf of the Inner West Street Association and the businesses on the Inner West Street to thank you and to say thank you for your trust, and thank you for opening up the process to groups like ours to let us help the city do what we can. I just personally wanted to add thanks to Alderman Budge, who spent a lot of time working with us, and Mayor, to you for your work in assembling a great administrative team. Thank you. You all deserve kudos. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And to do Alderwoman Finlayson wants to make a comment, a shameless plug. These things are really fantastic. I mean, from the business owners and everything else. We posted on our Instagram. They got more likes than anything we've ever done. So thank you for having faith. I know the city's not always been an easy place to do business. It took a lot of work to pull off. So we appreciate that. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I had the opportunity to attend last Wednesday night, and it was absolutely wonderful. And so I would encourage my colleagues and everyone in the listening audience and beyond to come out on Wednesday night. It is truly an enchantment. I mean, and I understand at least one of the restaurants is already sold out for every seat for the season. So get your reservation in quickly. But, you know, one restaurant had white linen tablecloths with beautiful white flowers. I mean, it was extremely well done. So congratulations to your committee, your group. You've done us very proud. So come on out and enjoy.
The next three people signed up to speak are Ellie Tierney, Philip Dales, and Arjan Van Andel.
Can you hear me? Hey, Joe, can we extend that down on Main Street now? Dining under the stars, all right? Hi, my name
After
is...
you organize it.
What? Oh, I will. My name is Ellie Tierney. I live at 85 East Street, and I am president of the Ward 1 Residents Association. I just want to talk about two issues, and in order of importance. We, Ward 1 Residents Association Board, who I am speaking on behalf of, would like to thank Sheila, Alderman Finlayson, and Chief Pristo for orchestrating that dialogue the last Monday night, I believe. We clearly had the audience. The environment was a little bit tough, and in looking around the room, I could sense that there were a lot of people that still wanted to talk, and I know that was a tough decision because of it was recorded and they had to speak at the podium, and some people are not comfortable doing that. I also heard a very innocent comment of someone saying, well, that may not matter to someone who lives in Ward 1, and I'm here to say that racial intolerance and disrespectfulness and all that injustice does not know zip codes, and I'm here to say that whatever Ward 1 can do as far as keeping the dialogue going. I heard a comment about maybe needing some green space in one of the housing developments. Just anything that we can do to keep the dialogue. We'd welcome some speakers at our next membership meeting, etc. So thank you again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Tierney, for coming out on last Monday, and thank you for your kind words. Folks can still send me their recommendations and their concerns. And ideas like green space in public housing will be forwarded to the Public Housing Board so they know what the community needs also. So this is just a beginning. We're looking at maybe in September, towards the end of September, to have a follow-up with that dialogue. So please encourage people to stay tuned, but they can email ideas and concerns anytime they want to me.
Okay. And yeah, Kevin, Mr. Simmons told me you had 8 pages of notes, so that was great.
Yes.
The second issue is, I don't know how to segue into this, but parking. SP Plus was very kind to have introduced their enforcement policy to the Ward 1 residents at a membership meeting. And they're really good at what they do, and it appears that the focus is on bringing tourists to Annapolis, also enforcing the street parking, accommodating the residents, etc. And it appears that the missed piece of the pie are mom and pop stores. They are what give Annapolis their charm. They are not ones to have an app on their website. They may not even have a website. We still have people that have ordered a book from Back Creek Books and need to pick it up, and they do not need a $40 parking ticket, or they will never come back. We still have people that go to the barbershop on Maryland Avenue. Believe it or not, we still have people that go to the cleaners on Duke of Gloucester. So I don't have an answer. There have been some suggestions about increasing the meter limits to 3 hours. They are talking about freeing up Main Street and having the employees of those businesses park in the garages and shuttle to work, etc. So it's a two-way street as far as the businesses. But August, I would ask you to take a walk down Maryland Avenue. It needs a little help there, and I don't know if parking, is the solution. It's always struggled, but we need SP3. I don't know, this isn't in their contract to have the dialogue with the businesses, but perhaps they can reach out specifically to Back Creek Books, because he has a lot of good ideas and he couldn't be here tonight. So thank you again, and have a good August.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Philip Dales, 200 Westgate Circle, Annapolis, Maryland. And I'd just like to offer a few more comments on the APF as it comes to vote tonight. I haven't heard from many people in the business community here arguing against an APF at this point. I think everyone is just hopeful that the council will avoid unintended consequences by including the right details tonight. First amongst those, I'd say, is the level, the percentages that you choose to accept. And the aldermen who sponsored the ordinance have put forward an amendment that's been available for a long time now that included the numbers 110% for elementary schools and middle schools and 120 for the high school. Those numbers match up with other jurisdictions in the state like Montgomery and Howard and Baltimore, places that are a bit more developed. They allow for flexibility in more urban developed environments. The second number and the second detail that's important is whether you test 3 years out or at 1, 2, and 3. To avoid unintended consequences, I think we should very much avoid testing, preventing a development that was in a jurisdiction where there's going to be capacity the third year, but has a small spike shown on expected enrollment in the second year. It's how they do it in the county. It's how we should do it here. Test 3 years out. And I'd say that as you consider these details, remember that the numbers that come in about the capacity and enrollment at the schools are going to change frequently, and they may change more so here in our jurisdiction than in others in more unpredictable ways. But changing the percentages of that have been decided and discussed over the course of this bill being considered at the council level, just because a certain set of numbers were brought to the attention of many members of the council recently, would indicate an agenda related to particular development rather than citywide policy for the kids. So I would say please stick to the good policy decisions that were being discussed. And then last, on that note, I'd say that excluding the high school is one of those decisions. The high school and crowding at the high school has not been the driving force in the need for this ordinance, and we're a jurisdiction that has one high school. So if the high school were to become unexpectedly closed, meaning closed in 3 years based on expected enrollment, which may have and hasn't had in the history of the city anything to do with new residential development, would be a citywide moratorium, an unintended consequence that will hurt all of us, not help anyone. It won't help the overcrowding at the school. It won't help the kids there. It just hurts the local economy, which has been hurting here, and the housing choices in this city. So please keep that my comments in mind on those details, and thank you so much for all of your time and consideration.
If there's anyone else from the public that would like to come forward, now's your opportunity.
How are you? I signed up on the wrong sheet, so you can take me off of the other one. I'm Brian Callahan, 49 West. I came down to thank you. Thank you guys for this Wednesday night dinner under the stars. 21 years, I'm at the end of my 21st year on West Street, and I had my record day last Wednesday. And I can tell you, after the last 8 years, with 70 new restaurants within 3 miles of me, and with Annapolis Town Edge, Jessica called it Town Center, but I refuse to do that. Annapolis Town Edge, or Parole Town Center, maybe. Anyway, with all that competition, and I'm all for competition, but it's been really hard. And now they're having music out there, and it's really putting a hurting on a lot of people downtown. I know just in the last 5 or 6 years, at least 10 restaurants that have turned over downtown. I don't know if you guys know that, but you count them on your hands. You can go down the list, at least 10. So I'm very, very grateful, and I want to thank you, because 15 years ago, if you were sitting there, none of you would have voted to allow us to do that. And 15 years ago, we wouldn't have had a Ward 1 president like this one here with a mural on her wall that's actually coming down here supporting the little mom and pop shops instead of telling us to get out of town and trying to not let us open to begin with. Thank you. So the town, as far as I'm concerned, is getting a lot better. One other thing I was going to say is the bill that the last 2-3 speakers have mentioned, this adequate facilities bill. I'll just say I hope that you consider that West Street, with all this work that I've done, that you are allowing us to do, all this, we're getting the flowers and we're getting the art and we're getting outdoor cafes. all that stuff that I fought for all these years, I'm worried that the empty lots up the street are not going to get developed if this bill isn't written right. And to address another issue that was brought up already, the parking. When we have downtown here, those empty lots filled with apartments, most of them are going to be single people, I can tell you that. But two, even if they did have children, now they're walking to school, so we've got kids that are being transported on their feet rather than with buses, you know. And that would also, most of those people that will rent those apartments will be walking. So they're not going to be the employees parking on the streets that, I know my employees have been having a hard time since these new cars have been going around. And when I was on the parking committee, I was an advocate of those. So I have no problem with them, but we need something for the city employees. $5 a day or something out at Knighton or somewhere nearby, because it's really, really hard to get employees that are going to come down and spend $12 when that's a whole hour and a half work for a lot of them. So thank you guys very much again, and I hope you'll consider my other comments.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles has a comment, but I would just like to say for the parking, it's currently $2 a day all the way out
at Knighton?
At the West End. I'm not sure what it is for Knighton, but we
Okay.
will look into that. Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Yeah. Mr. Bryan, I think you've convinced me. You can put me down for 2 for next Wednesday.
I'm sold out, honey.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
I really want to end the public hearing having two people coming forward, Mr. Minor and Mr. Callahan, complimenting. We're not used to getting those, but we'll let you go, Mr. Smith. Come on. We'll keep the public hearing going.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Doug Smith, 5 Rebel Street. I want to key in on the 2 comments that were made. I do believe things are getting better. The successful dining under the stars. We've got flower baskets up on the street thanks to contributions from the city and our residents. And the parking company, SP Plus, I think is doing an excellent job. We do have a meeting for downtown businesses next Tuesday, August the 2nd at 8:30. This is co-sponsored by the Annapolis Partnership and the city to get local businesses to talk to the SP Plus managers. So you all are welcome to come and hear what the business issues are around parking. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Now's your opportunity.
Good evening, Janet Norman, 787 Annapolis Neck Road, Ward 7. I just wanted to ask a question about the inclusion of items in the consent calendar. I know the citizens would like it to be the workings of city government as transparent as possible, so as Jessica said, that we actually know what you're voting on. You know, where is the money going? Are these the priorities the citizens of each ward think they should agree with? And that we have some input into the discussion. I notice on tonight's consent calendar that I just saw right now was the revised community grant funding allocations. And I've been asking for about 10, 15 years for increased transparency in the community grant allocations. They've never been posted online for people to see in previous years, for people to see what the application was for, what the money was for. Many times the grants were, there was a requested amount and then it was decided to give all the grants 1/3 of what they requested. So I've also not seen a lot of performance measures. Do they report back to you and do you report to the citizens as to what the performance measures were, what they were going to do with that money, and did they achieve that? So for transparency's sake, I'd love to see that, and I'd love to have that taken off the consent calendar and you actually talk about it in another forum on its own. And for the election code, is the election code update also on the consent calendar? Yes? I'd like to see that as its own non-consent item so that citizens can know what you've done. I came in and testified before the election committee that was investigating that, and I never got a report back or never found out anything. I mean, I think we had some serious election issues where the voting precincts were issued in a 1,400-page PDF with 900 pages blank that couldn't load on a phone, that didn't have lots of Ward 5 in it the day of election. I'd like to know how that was all resolved before it gets moved to a consent calendar. I could have gone in and voted as Mr. Pfeiffer's wife because there was so little election judge oversight of addresses or checking. So I think the citizens would really like to know and move that off the consent calendar and publicize that. What have you actually changed to get ready for the next election? We'd really like to know that without it moving through. Thank you.
So, Ms. Norman, I can
Yes.
give you an update on the elections.
That'd be great.
I
Thank
spoke
you.
with the county executive today. One of the things we've done is to highlight our partnership, different things. When you look at the city government, there were a lot of mistakes in the last election. You know, we have people that do this part-time once every 4 years. They have professional staff that do it 40 hours a week every single day. Gubernatorial, presidential elections. So the county's agreed to take over and basically run our elections almost entirely completely. We still have a board of supervisors that'll seal the election, but in terms of absentee ballots, where you vote, everything else, they're going to be deciding that. And they've invited the council on a tour to come up and see the facilities in groups of 4. So, you know, if you look at the county and their track record and history, they've done an exceptional job. The consent calendar in general came about as a suggestion to move things that are regularly routine on there. And I will follow up with what you said on the grants, because I'm almost positive at some point they have to be on the website, because they're in my budget and the finance committee. There's recommendations of what to go, and I know the finance director can get you a list of what they requested, what we've allocated, and the delta between the two.
Right.
So I can get that for you and make sure it's on there, but I'm pretty sure we put that online.
Well, I would hope that it's sent out in a press release and that we all in town get to talk about it, you know, send that out as a proposed press release. These are the amounts, you know, we're giving. Is it enough? Is it not enough? Is it to the right organizations? If citizen money is going to be spent to nonprofits, let's all be in on the discussion.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for the update on the elections thing. I'm looking forward to a much easier election on our citizens. I know my cousin had a 2-month-old baby and schlepped her around to 3 different precincts to try and get to the right precinct to vote. And so I'd love to see better digital access and digital resources for our citizens.
We'll make sure we send those out in advance. It is a challenge in that the city elections have different polling places than the county or the state and the presidential, largely because of the schools. The school system won't close down a school just for a city election, so we have to find new polling places. Yeah. But we'll make sure we send a direct mail to each resident letting them know.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the council? Now is your chance. Seeing no motions, I declare petitions, reports, and communications closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The next item on the agenda tonight is the consent calendar. There are several items, 2 second readers, 2 first readers, and some budget revision requests.
Is there any alderperson who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Alderman Littman.
Mr. Mayor, can you please remove ID 29916?
Which ones are those? All right, they're removed. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Mayor, if I could just ask a question about
Yes, sir.
the 02716, the election code update. I know there was some interest in some of our parts in making amendments to that changes. As I understand it, the challenge is because the election board is making recommendations to us that we are basically endorsing, and there is not time before the next election cycle opens to make changes. I know some of us were interested in a number of changes in that space. My hope was you could explain why that's on this consent calendar, because it really is not germane for any substantive amendments because of that process. And secondarily, what you described with the county in this new way we're going to handle the elections, that's not taking part in this ordinance. How should we expect that to be rolled out? Because
I'll answer the second one, but let me let Alderman Arnett go first.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, by way of clarification, there's two different changes to the election code. One is a very complicated set of changes that we went over with recommendations first from the ad hoc committee and then from the elections board. Rules and City Government labored long and hard on that, and it's very complicated, but that one is not the one that's on the consent calendar. The ordinance that's on the consent calendar is a very technical ordinance that has to do with clarifying when there's only one polling place, how are things being managed. It was brought to us from the Office of Law, from the city clerk who manages the elections, and certainly we can take it off and discuss it, but I don't think there's anything. The reason that it's on the consent calendar was, it was our belief anyway, that there's nothing there that once people read it they would find anything other than straightforward and necessary. There is a time constraint. We really do need to pass this tonight in order for it to be acted in time for the next set of elections, but certainly if people want to have this off the consent calendar to discuss it, it's not the one that my colleague is thinking of. It is a much simpler, more technical set of amendments that we pretty much have to do to comply with elections code. But
matching the dates. So to answer the two questions you brought up earlier, Alderman Pfeiffer, one is there is a time deadline of August the 6th between substantive changes that can be made in the election. So for example, the Rules Committee took up a number of amendments, no-fault absentee ballot. So in the county presidential elections, you basically can vote absentee for any reason. So if you're sick, you're out of town, you can do it. In the city, there's a strict set of codes to require an absentee ballot. So those are the recommendations that the Rules Committee made and the Elections Board to go through. In terms of the county taking it, there's not necessarily a timeline on that. So we're not voting on if the county's going to run it. That's something we've been working in the pipelines, and the city manager and attorney have been working through the process of how we manage that going back and forth. So that's not up for a vote tonight. So that being said, is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Second.
All in favor? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Panelides?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Aye.
Alderman Kirby? Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Budge?
Yes.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
All right, Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next item is our public hearings. The first one being O-2816, involving a lease agreement at the Stanton Center for the Annapolis Arts District.
There are three people signed up to speak, Don Lamb Minor and Dewan Gay. Well, two people.
Is Don two of the three?
Somebody scratched their name out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman again. The Arts District is a 501c3 that is currently being managed by the Inter-West Street Association. We do need a location desperately. We do have much work to do in the Arts District. As you know, that encompasses much of West Street, Calvert Street, and runs over to Maryland Hall and the Bates schools. So there's much we need to do. We have just generate tons of paperwork. We generate tons of space needs. So there's much we have in we hope you can support our taking the lease there. Can't hear me? Now you can hear me.
You have 5 minutes, so you can say it all again if you would like.
At my age, I don't remember it all again. So we're 501c3, guys. We need the space. We're doing good work. There's much more work we have to do. Would like your help with it. Thank you.
If anybody else would like to come, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O-2816 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next is O-2916 involving refillable container licenses under the alcoholic beverage laws.
No one had signed up in advance to speak. If you would like to come forward, now is your chance. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O-2916 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next, Mr. Mayor, is the corresponding resolution for refillable container license fees, R-25-16.
Nobody signed up to speak. If you would like to address the council on this subject, please come forward. Now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R-2516 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, we're at legislative action. There are second readers. I see first there's a proposed motion to postpone R-1715 to a date certain.
Well, let me say, is there a motion to adopt O-3615 on second reader?
Well, that's adequate public facilities.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Which
sorry.
one are we on?
I think
R-17. Oh, okay.
a motion to postpone R-1715.
Apologize. Is there a motion to postpone R-1715 until the special meeting of October 24th, 2016?
So moved, but point of information, please. I believe that we're postponing this until we get the class and comp study done.
Correct.
And that is probably easily a half a year away, if not longer.
There's a code requirement where you can only postpone to keep the bill alive up to 90 days. So the 90 days would be October.
Can we
the
do
24th.
longer than 90 days?
You'd have it would have to go back on the agenda in October
All
for
right,
you
so,
to extend it.
So we should do it for at least 90 days because we're not going to be ready for this for a while. But a lot of work has been done by the staff on this resolution and a lot of, in my view, good work. So I'd hate to lose it and have to start over. And in fact, we may sine die before we can get to it. So I do move that we postpone for 90 days.
Alderman Pan?
First of all, I second that motion. But, Mr. Mayor, I also, in case it hasn't been made absolutely obvious from my colleagues' comments, so we don't get accused of continually kicking the can down the road, it's with the understanding that it may very well have to be postponed again when it comes up in October. And I think we need to put that on the record in case it wasn't adequately on the record already. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next legislative action is ordinance O-36-15 having to do with adequate public facilities.
Is there a motion to adopt O-3615 on second reader?
So moved. Second.
All right, now we're coming into discussion. We have a number of proposed amendments, and we'll take them in the order in which they appear. So the first is the Pfeiffer Amendment, and then the next one is the revised Littman-Arnett proposed amendment, and I believe there's going to be some more from the floor. So, Alderman Pfeiffer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will actually, if it's okay, talk a little bit about this amendment and the origins of it, and then we'll ask to table it because there is a better version of this amendment that will appear in the Arnett-Littman amendments. But this was an outgrowth of the meetings a number of us had about APF, how to apply it across the city, and trying to reconcile that with what Mr. Callahan talked about earlier tonight, that especially in the Main Street corridor, and on Inner West Street, we have state-sanctioned redevelopment authorities in place. We have sort of a long-term commitment that the council and the city has made to do sort of innovative redevelopment in those spaces, and the thought was that they shouldn't be subject to the same rules, and you would try and take them out. So that was the initial, when we touched this a couple months ago, when the council decided to wait for the city-county work group, this amendment was put together. Since then, planning and zoning and staff have helped correct the language to much more closely reflect where we were headed, and that will appear in the next package of amendments. So I will withdraw this amendment this time.
The next amendments are the revised Littman-Arnett proposed amendments, and I'll let the sponsor speak to them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming your preference is to discuss these one by one and then vote on each one? Thank you. Amendment number 1 is largely responsive to the development community. We are reiterating from the original language that non-residential projects are excluded. This is the list of exempt from this, the requirements of this chapter. The second B is residential subdivisions if no new dwelling unit potential is created, and that again was repeated. And C, institutions for the care of the aged is repeated. What's that? Thank you, sorry. So the D is the one that Alderman Pfeiffer was alluding to. D proposes to exempt proposed projects that are in the Arts and Entertainment District. And number 2, the boundaries as established by the Main Street, Maryland Letter of Agreement for Designated Communities as shown on the Annapolis Main Street District map dated 3/9/16. And in your packet are both of those maps to make that as perfectly clear as we can possibly do. E is the exemption for age-restricted residential developments, and that's a defined term in this ordinance. And F is the grandfathering language that was requested and which Alderman Arnett and I have agreed to include, which says proposed projects that have received a certificate of adequate public facilities prior to the effective date of Ordinance 3615.
All right.
And I'm making that motion.
Okay, so in order to keep this, because we're going to have a number of amendments, I think we should vote on each one as we're going down the line. So is there any discussion on this amendment A through F? Alderman Arnett?
Second.
Thank you. Yeah, I second it. These amendments have all been discussed at rules and also jointly. So I think we have gotten a great deal of understanding, I hope, among the members of the council. And so I just want to report that we, rules reported out favorably on this amendment.
Alderman Budge?
Just reminding my colleagues on the council to really use your mics, because I'm getting text from the back of the room saying we can't hear because of all the fan noise.
Is there any other discussion on these amendments? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I'm trying to.
Mm-hmm.
The question is related to Mr. Gutwald. Do all projects receive adequate facilities? How is it that we would exempt? Do all projects get adequate facilities?
I think you're asking Mr. Gutwald, but if you're asking me, this only applies to people seeking an APF. So if you already have an APF, it's saying you don't need to apply.
If they qualify under Title 22 for APF, meaning they have to be tested, that's the 11 units or the 10,000 square feet, then they have to get a certificate of adequacy. Whether it's a planned development, whether it's major subdivision, they have to get a certificate of adequacy. So, yes, a planned development would get, if it is more than 11 units, it would be required to get a certificate of adequacy. So Title 22 has a criteria in which APF standards shall be applicable to. Doesn't matter what type of development it is, if it meets that criteria, it must get a certificate of adequacy. Since the inception of Title 22, you're probably, I mean, what Mr. Littman, Alderman Littman is referring to is projects that currently, say Thomas Woods, they still need to get a grading permit. They may still have to, or other projects that may still have to get their recorded plats, but they have a certificate of adequacy in hand, and they're good for 5 years once they're issued a certificate of adequacy, which is different from a plan development, which is only good for 2 years. Which is possible getting extensions, obviously. Not. Correct. I think this amendment just says if you have one, you're grandfathered from this new bill.
You don't have
Correct.
to jump back through it.
Sorry, Pete Gelwald, Director of Planning and Zoning.
Alderman Pan? Question? All right. Thank you, Director. Is there any other discussion on these sets of amendments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain, yes. Okay. 2 abstentions. All right. Alderman Littman, number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amendment 2 was crafted with the help of Director Gutwald. It proposes to amend the language on page 6. Currently, it just has a reference to July 1 of each year, and that refers to when the testing or looking at the chart is done. What happens is after the testing is first done in July 1, then kids actually show up in September at the various schools, and those numbers are updated. And rather than wait until the next July 1 to update that chart, this is making sure that we're looking at the more frequent number, the more updated number, so we're looking at accurate information. And it could fluctuate up or down, of course. So it's to have the director look at this chart January 1 and July 1. Director Gutwald, anything to add to that, or did I capture? Okay.
So to be clear for all of our colleagues, if you're following this chart that Director had sent out earlier, you're looking at the utilization numbers mid-year, not the projected enrollment as of July 1, correct? Yep. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt that amendment?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
All right, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Amendment number 3. This is doing a couple of things. Number 1, if you recall, I'm sure everyone does at this point, the ordinance that Alderman Arnett and I introduced back in July of 2015, a little over 12 months ago, had as the cap for capacity at all 3 schools, elementary, middle, and high school, at 100%. And that was specifically because we were trying to, as best we can, mimic the county program for APF. As I'm sure everyone knows, at 100%, it became some concern to a number of people. And so we've been talking about various numbers, but 100% is what is in the original ordinance that has been before you up until this ordinance. So the one change, we had been talking about changing separating elementary and middle school because there's only 1 high school. So for elementary, we had been talking about 110% for elementary, middle, and 120 for the high school to try to quell some of the concern that the high school was about to close, and if we didn't raise the number to 120, the high school would be closed, and that would close the whole city. We just got new information, new to me at least, today, midday, which is the latest information from the county on their projections for enrollment at all of the Annapolis cluster schools. Interestingly, for the high school, the high school would not be closed unless we had a capacity limit at 100%. If we raise the high school anywhere above any increment of 5, so 105, 110, 115, 120, in all those scenarios, the high school stays open. So at 120%, frankly, it is a much higher percentage than what is frankly necessary to ensure that that school stays open while the Board of Education and County Council have time to address capacity at the high school. For the elementary and middle schools, all this time that we've been talking about 110%, we were told essentially, and using the 2015 chart, that would address the concerns we have at the schools that we know to be mostly over capacity. And for the children from Ward 5, they're going to Tyler Heights and Hillsmere, so they've been my primary focus. Hillsmere is so over capacity that they've had to add a 5th trailer that just at the end of this spring to get ready for the upcoming year. And in last year, the 2015 chart, that capacity was listed at 568 expected enrollment for the upcoming year, which begins obviously in just a few weeks. The capacity of that school is 509. So the capacity we had been looking at is 568 over 509. Our new number, somehow 55 kids somehow come out of that enrollment expectation. I have no idea where those 55 kids have gone in just a matter of weeks, but now all of a sudden the enrollment is said to be 513, 4 seats over capacity. Frankly, this is beyond my capacity of belief, because if it was truly expected to be 513, 4 seats over, why would they have added a 5th trailer to that school's campus? So there's an issue with the numbers there. Not our issue, but there's an issue that suspends disbelief. So anyway, that is why I had this very recent change to make the amendment at 105. The one school, frankly, that this changes is Germantown Elementary. It's one of the 4 schools that we had all talked about as being way over capacity. There's a general understanding in the community that it is over capacity, and yet it would be less than 110%, but greater than 105%. So the difference of 105 versus 110 mostly applies to Germantown Elementary. So a couple of other things that this ordinance does. In the middle of the ordinance, it is specifically including making clear that when you apply for school capacity, that you're looking at not only the expected enrollment as it exists before your application, but that it adds in the kids of your application. So if in a hypothetical case, a school has, just using round numbers, 500 seats at capacity, and they have enrolled 495, but your plan brings an additional 20 kids, those additional 20 kids would be factored into the computation. Those are the 2 main things that I could think of. Oh, and the third very important thing, at Alderman Budge's request, he requested a change from the initial language of 5 to 11 that would be the bottom benchmark for when this ordinance would apply. And just to expound on where those 2 numbers come from, the 5 that was in the original mimics what the county does. And that's, again, Alderman Arnett and I were trying to mimic what the county does. 11 is what the rest of the city code does. So it's this change from 5 to 11 will allow the smaller developments, again, probably that Mr. Callahan was referring to not have application of this ordinance. So those are the 3 things that this amendment does. And I move the amendment.
Alderwoman Pendle-Charles?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Gutwall, for this updated educational master facilities plan for 2016. And I'm looking at the utilization for 2018, and I see that Georgetown East, 62%, Roland Knowles, 77%, and West Annapolis Elementary, 77%. And I've been reading the Capitol, and I'll be interested and curious to see the issue concerning redistricting and how that all plays into this. So thank you so much for this report.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
That does raise another issue. The school system is opening a magnet or a contract school at the old Capitol building in 2017. When they gave you these most recent projections, did they count the 500? I believe it's supposed to begin with a population of 500 and grow to 800 within 3 years, if I'm correct. Do these numbers reflect those capacities?
I don't believe so, but that is the whole reason why we picked July 1st. So for one of the testing dates is so that they have made their decisions as to any new capital improvement program and/or redistricting, and they would adjust the enrollments or the projections accordingly based on what they know is coming down the pipeline, and that would be reflected in the new enrollment projections. So I don't believe any of that has taken that into consideration, since that is not up and operating, or they don't know, how many students are coming from which schools at this point in time.
So
But
this
I can't
inform-
answer that completely truthfully, but I just don't believe that that's the case right now.
So when did you get this information from them?
July 1st is when they posted it on their website, so we pulled it down just after the holiday weekend and started running the numbers ourselves.
Okay, I don't recall when it was in the paper, but it sounds like they have already made that decision about opening that school. So I find it interesting that they have not added those 500 extra seats onto their master facilities plan yet. And maybe I'm talking about for 2017, not 2016.
Sure, I understand. I could double check that, but I don't believe any of these numbers have reflected any of that. So,
Okay.
got to remember, this starts in September 30th of last year. They kind of finalize and get it to the state in October, November. They publish them and adopt them in like January or sometime after that, and then they finally published them just past July, I think it was, or just
So maybe
a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe if we waited 6 months, we'd get considerably different numbers from what we see in
And that
front
was
of us.
sort of the rationale for the twice a year.
And Alderman Lippman made a good point. The numbers change. And the school system's configurations as well as MDE's changes, which is one of the reasons that I am very concerned about what we're trying to do here. We are stepping into something that from a place in our hearts we would like to be, but in reality it's not solving the problem. And I'll stop right there until I get to my own amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, actually, I'd like to build on Alderwoman Finlayson's point, and I'd like to build on Alderwoman Finlayson's point, and I'd like to think that some of the reasons why they're changing is because of the focus that we have brought on the fact that they have left, particularly our elementary schools, so overcrowded for so long. And that's why I feel very positively about this legislation and this particular amendment. The real solution all along has been to redistribute the students to where the empty seats are. And hopefully we'll pass this legislation and never have to use it, because the school board will be on top of their job and not allow overcrowding. That's the fond hope. But in the meantime, I think it's nice to have this remedy available should they forget to pay attention to crowding situations.
You know, you reminded me of something I should have said at the beginning, but I wanted to do a thank you to everyone right now. One is a thank you to everybody, all the council, for dealing with this. I really appreciate all the work everybody put into it, and I wanted to thank the work group in particular that consisted of county members, the Board of Education, Annapolis Environmental Commission, city and county council representatives for putting the work into this. You know, it takes a lot to get things done in city government. You know, this has been in the works for almost a year, and I appreciate everybody's ability to compromise and to give in to get something passed. You know, without this legislation, it's basically been like the Wild West. You can come in and do whatever you want, whenever you want in the city. And this, while it's not perfect, I think is the great solution to put laws into place that'll slow down the overcrowding of our schools in the future. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their patience on this. It's been a long time. Alderman Kirby?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you say this will put things in place to overcrowd the school. I still want one person to tell me what development has been built in the last 20 years that's caused a problem at Tyler Heights. Anybody, audience, anyone in this building, tell me what development has caused the overcrowding of Tyler Heights Elementary, the highest in the state. There is a need for some types of development, but this legislation certainly is not going to address the problems at Tyler Heights, not this year coming, and not in the foreseeable future.
Alderman Arnett?
I disagree with my colleague from Ward 6 when he speaks to the future, because if you've been paying attention to all of the approvals that we have before us for new residential units along Forest Drive and elsewhere in the city, there is a big bolus of new families coming. Presumably, some of them will have children. And we know we have schools over capacity now. And this legislation is meant to be a remedy for that. Whatever happened in the past, and for whatever reason, we know we now have schools over capacity, and we don't have the redistricting that we so sorely need. And so it's looking to the future and all of the future development that is in the pipeline that this is the remedy for. This is what it's aimed at.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Arnett, I hate to think we're a society like China now. We're going to tell a woman how many babies she can have. I don't think that that's going to happen here. The projects along the Forest Drive corridor that's going to be built have been long planned. The school department has seen an overcrowding at Tyler Heights. They have refused to redistrict. Alderwoman Finlayson has just talked about 500 more seats. I don't think that this legislation makes the school department redistrict any faster. You know, and like Mr. Callahan said, it's kind of a backdoor approach for a moratorium on building. Period.
Any other discussions or suggestions to the amendment? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amendment number 4 pertains to page 7. This does two things. The first is frankly, just more of a grammatical or accuracy correction. If you flip to page 7, line 37, the title currently says conditional review approval, but this is not an approval. This is a process. So it's changing the word approval to process. The second thing this does is this paragraph, this section, has 3 sections, A, B, and C. B is the important one from the developer standpoint. That's the one that says they don't have to wait on the waiting list for any more than 6 years. And so I'm not suggesting that we take that out. But A and C refer to a conditional review. And one thing that we did get out of the work group was the fallacy or the problem with having these conditional reviews instead of just the one final review. So this amendment strikes paragraphs A and C, leaving the important one in B. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you. Amendment number 5 refers to page 8, number 4, that same section, B. This was a request for clarification from the Planning Commission that I believe was at the request of Mr. Elson, and it adds the words for consideration after the word list.
Motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Amendment number 6, still on page 8, line 7. This is language that largely came from the development community seeking clarification on when the 6-year window begins. And it clarifies that the 6-year window begins when all of the pieces of the application have been submitted and so acknowledged by the Director of Planning and Zoning. As opposed to, there was a potential argument that the 6-year period didn't begin until the application was either processed or some much later point in the period. So this is in the balancing of all the things that we're doing, this is balancing in the favor of the development community to get that 6-year clock started as quickly as possible.
Any,
So moved.
Is there a second? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah, I'm going back to my original question, Mr. Gutwall. We're talking Amendment 6, right? Page 8, line 7?
Yes.
Application for certificate of public facilities. There are several projects that are in the pipeline now and have their certificate, but not needing a certificate of adequate facilities, correct?
No, I don't think so. If you meet the conditions and criteria of Title 22, you have to get a certificate of adequacy. There are projects in the pipeline that don't meet that criteria, so no, they don't have to get a certificate of adequacy. That means they're under 11 units, they're less than 10,000 square feet, they don't go through the APF criteria. So the Title 22 does not even apply to them.
What about
But-
tolling? We had projects.
Right. So that has come and gone, but if you have received, your certificate of adequacy is basically given when you get final approval by either, well, most of them would be by the Planning Commission or Board of Appeals, and you get site plan approval. That certificate of adequacy is issued at the same time in concert with that approval.
Well, let me give you an example of my ward, Rocky Gorge.
Mm-hmm. That actually was approved prior to Title 22 being initiated, so it wasn't subject to APF at all.
Okay, so it will not, it is exempt from
Correct.
this. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Finally, amendment number 7 also came from the Planning Commission, which I think was at the request of Mr. Elson. Add some additional clarification. So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstaining?
Abstain.
Are there any amendments? Hold on. Let me back to my sheet. Any amendments from the floor? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I hope everyone has a copy. It's a two-sided document. I'm proposing these amendments, first of all, because I think the legislation has some merit. But as both of the sponsors have said, this legislation is not going to fix the problem. Our school board, nor Anne Arundel County, have taken official positions to support this legislation. One would think that if they were committed to what this legislation said, they would have taken an official position. They would have been here to support it. I understand the need to make a statement to the community about development. Absolutely, I do. I understand the need to assist the school system and even to encourage them strongly to be more diligent in constructing our buildings adequately to accommodate the needs of all of our children. This legislation doesn't do that. One of my greatest fears is that this legislation will hurt our children. You know, I am always talking about adequate housing, adequate jobs, adequate opportunities for our residents. We want to believe that the children are our heartstrings and we care about their education, but I also believe that we care about their housing. We have many of the young people who attend our elementary schools particularly who live in inadequate housing. And this legislation will keep them in inadequate housing. Many of them have parents who don't have jobs that are sustainable as far as the living wage is concerned. This legislation will not help in any capacity to bring jobs to our city. Our economic development coordinator told us that this legislation will hamper economic development in our city, but we have it before us anyway. I think we need to be honest about what the purpose is. It is not to stop children from coming into our schools. The statistics have been already given to us. If overcrowding was directly connected to development, we would had to have built over 3,000 houses in the last 10 years or so. We have not. So clearly development is not the issue. Head Start is coming into Anne Arundel County Public Schools this year. They've been taken out of the hands of the Community Action Agency, and now they're going into our public schools, in the elementary schools. Is there consideration for overcrowding in those elementary schools? I think not. And that's a school board decision. We have nothing to do with that. But they are already exacerbating the problem that exists. And will our legislation change that at all? Absolutely not. This is a feel-good piece of legislation to make us feel like we are opposing what some in the community thinks is a danger. I say that we take a better step and we look at what will work all the way around. Yeah, let's give the school board that nudge and ask them to pay more attention to our schools and make sure that they are at capacity. We need to do the same with the county executive. Tyler Heights was number 2 on the MGT study, and it's been knocked down the list some. So we need to be having that discussion, absolutely. And I suspect that committee that we were all on will help somewhere along the line. But the recommendations weren't hard and fast that we should be following. So I have come up with, in spite of all of that, I have come up with some amendments to this legislation that I hope will make it palatable for all of us to agree to. The first amendment is from page 6, line 32, which was Alderman Littman's first amendment, which gave the exceptions. And to that, I would like to add, and my lettering is different. I have F on my sheet, but maybe it's, but adding a new letter, F, which reads, proposes development within the boundaries of the outer West Street community are identified in the 2009 Comprehensive Plan of the City of Annapolis. The boundary, I guess it's our northwest boundary, is Route 2. And just beyond that boundary, the county, the developer, is putting a number of houses behind the Popeyes and behind the diner. They are taken out of consideration for adequate facilities for Annapolis High School. So they are right on our border, and they're being allowed to add to the population of not only the elementary and the middle, but the high schools. And we, right across the street, are hamstringing ourselves, and we cannot. So that is the First Amendment. I'd like for us to take each amendment separately, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. The second one adds to my letter G, proposes projects that received a certificate of adequate public facilities or, and this is what I've been questioning Mr. Gutwall on, plan development approval or special exception approval prior to the effective date of this ordinance. That would include anybody who is in the pipeline in any capacity. So that is my First Amendment.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Yeah, I have a question of Alderwoman Finlayson. I say I have a question for Alderwoman Finlayson. On letter F, would that include the old Capitol building?
No. Well, I don't know the boundaries for this. I'm speaking specifically as an example to the development that's coming in behind the Popeyes.
Because the development behind Popeyes is overseen by the town center, and there is no way that can be stopped. That's my understanding, and that's what I've been told. So I've been to a couple of the meetings outside of Ward 3. This goes beyond Ward 3, and I was asked to go to a couple of meetings, and that's an opportunities area there, and I think it's one other one in the county. It might be Glen Burnie.
It's Odenton.
Odenton. So we really have no leeway on that one. And number two.
Well, may I address that first?
Certainly.
That is exactly the reason. That is exactly the reason. There is what's called a core area. The town center is part of that core area, and it branches out beyond what we know as the town center. And the town center, and similar to Odington, they have the ability to exempt them out of adequate facilities. So in that area in Parole and in a similar area in Odington, they can do all the development they want. The schools could be at 139% capacity like Tyler Heights, and they can still develop. That is the county's choice. That's what's lacking with us.
That goes to my point about the Capitol building and the proposed Monarch School. If this is part of that and we can go beyond the boundaries, then we have a complicated problem. We had the charrette back in March. As many folks have seen the letter that the Greater Parole Community Association had in the paper on yesterday. This, to me, needs to be fleshed out with the community residents. I'm not quite sure what it's doing and what it's saying, and I'm hesitant on voting, even abstaining to this, because it's going to affect the Ward 3 residents, and they've not had an opportunity, especially based on the charrette that we had, and also the Outer West Street Opportunity Area back in 2009. This kind of complicates my position as the Ward 3 alderman in that area. So I'm kind of confused about this whole piece of language here, and maybe somebody can help me here.
Maybe I can help you, because this is dealing with development. The Monarch School that's coming into the new Capitol building is a public school facility. They are building a school there, or building out an existing building to be a school. This has to do with housing development.
I understand that, but that still is all part and parcel of what's going to be built in that area, whether it's development, whether it's a school, or whatever it is. I'm just looking at this in a critical eye, because it's all going to affect the other thing. That's what I'm saying. So I'm just kind of really confused about this. Maybe I'm a slow learner. Maybe I need to go back to school, but I'm just a little confused about this whole thing. I don't know if anybody else is. I am. And I'm just hesitant because I know it affects my ward.
I think the clarification you're going for is that this is only for residential properties. Commercial is already exempt. So the Monarch School, whether it comes or goes, wouldn't be affected by this legislation at all.
Okay, but
unless I'm mistaken in that.
Okay. I'm just kind of, I'm just a little nervous about the whole thing.
Sure. Alderman Arnett and Alderman Budge.
Yeah, thank you,
Because
Mr.
there are some things in the pipeline in that area, and I'm trying to balance out everything. But anyway, thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson.
And I believe that the issue that Alderwoman Findle Charles is now raising are legitimate issues, and I would respectfully ask Alderwoman Finlayson to withdraw all of these amendments. This legislation has been before us for a year. She has sat on all the committees that have taken up this legislation. We have gotten this 10 minutes ago and have had no time for either us or the public to understand what these amendments are and what the impacts of them would be. I think this can be addressed. There may well be legitimate issues here that we need to consider, but I think it should go through the regular process as new legislation rather than at this last minute coming in with things that are very complex and have had no opportunity for anyone, especially us on the council, to consider and to consult with the planning department and all of the other people in our community. So I really take exception to trying to do business this way at the 11th hour. I think that it should be withdrawn. If not, I would urge my colleagues to vote these down and have it submitted as new legislation so we have time to consider them. There may well be things that we can all agree on or work around, but to have it here at the 11th hour is just really not a good way to do business.
May I? My amendments came today because I got word that the alderman, the maker of the amendments, was going to withdraw them. And so, yes, it was with haste that I put these together, not with haste in making the decisions about what to submit, because I had two forms of the document. One was Alderman Lippman's amendment, and one with totally of my own changes. As you said, we have been discussing this for a year, and you're absolutely right. So by now, and you and I both served on that county multi-committee, so I'm sure there is nothing here that doesn't sound like something you've not heard before. If you'd like to postpone action on the entire legislation, I'm willing to do that if you need more time to analyze it all.
I think it's very unfair to ask the council to do that after all the investment by the council and the community and the departments. And then I think there are new things here, and there are certainly things that can have impacts that I would like to understand. Even at lunchtime today when we met, we didn't hear about this. I mean, when to get
we didn't
this
have this
dropped
at
on-
lunchtime today either. So, you know.
Well, I don't think that is as substantive as this. I have really, I've never heard of a utilization chart until we're reading it here. And I think that that may well be a good idea, but I'd like to have time to do it, but I don't want to hold up the legislation to do that. I would recommend that this is something that could be amendments to whatever legislation passes tonight, if anything passes tonight, and there's plenty of time to consider it in the proper, orderly fashion that the council has always followed and has before us.
Alderman,
I just think it's...
if I may, I think it's important for the public to kind of be brought up to speed on this dialogue on what's happening. And this isn't in defense of the amendments or anything that's going forward, but I think it's unfair to say the Alderwoman can't introduce an amendment at the last minute. Certainly the ones that we just passed from Alderman Lippman, the 105, the first time I'd ever heard about that was today at lunch. So for everybody to know going forward, the county produces a chart as of July 1. Alderman Lippman was notified, as well as the rest of us, that some of the schools we thought would be closed wouldn't be closed. And that kind of started this last minute rush to get things done. So going from 110 to 105%. So the amendment we just voted on, that's the first time I ever heard the number 105. So I don't think it's fair to say Alderwoman Finlayson can't do the same thing. And that's not to say it's in support of it, but I think procedurally, that's not fair to her.
By your leave, we have been talking about percentages that we would include or not include.
Right.
We didn't include whole new areas. I don't even know the geographic boundaries of the area in F. I don't know what's in there.
I don't
We've already
either.
heard Alderwoman Pendle Charles express some concerns about including it. So, I mean, I just think this is not timely, and I don't think it's fair to do this at the last minute.
I would
only
say
one vote.
Sure,
We'll
no,
see how my colleagues feel about it.
I would say I agree with you, and I don't plan to vote for Amendment F. But with that being said, I don't think that's fair to say she can't introduce them. So, Alderman Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't for 1 minute question the bona fides of my colleague from Ward 4. Sometimes these things happen and they need to be addressed at the last minute. But I do agree with Alderman Arnett that I think that this is very difficult to try to absorb. I mean, frankly, I pretty sure I know or have known what I was going to do tonight, but after reading these, I mean, maybe one or two of these, I'm referring specifically to Amendment 1, that I'd like to know more about them. I don't want to postpone the vote. I don't think that's appropriate. I do think perhaps this is the subject of future legislation, if that's what the sponsor or putative sponsor would care to do. I don't know if I'd be for it. I don't know if I'd be against it. But I know that when I get something and I don't feel I have enough facts in front of me to make a decision, I'm certainly not going to vote for it. And I think that, I mean, we're ready to go after a year on this, and you know, maybe keep this in the back of our minds. And if somebody wants to introduce legislation amending ordinances, happens all the time, then we consider it.
Mr. Mayor, since there is such discomfort, I will move that we postpone action on this legislation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of postponing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Leave
Oh,
the
wait,
note.
okay. I wasn't quite, are we just talking about this amendment? No, the whole
The
piece.
entire
She was talking
legislation.
about the whole-
Okay.
So we're back
I'm-
on amendment number 1?
That's where I thought we were, on the amendment number 1. That's what I thought we were
No,
just voting on.
my motion was to postpone the legislation, not the amendment.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
Mr. Mayor, may I point out that in addition to the other chart that Mr. Gutwall sent us today, it was the school utilization chart, thus the language that was used in the amendment.
So,
can we...
on this one, and I had a question for the city attorney, Mr. Elson and Mr. Gutwald, trying to understand point G. I think maybe if we gave examples of particular projects, it would help shed some light on it. What's your objection?
We have two motions on the floor now.
There was a motion to adopt.
Who's chairing the meeting?
We have the motion made to move and was seconded or I don't know, I don't believe it was seconded.
Well, let me ask, is there a second?
Second.
And now we have another motion on top of that to postpone all the legislation, which was seconded. I don't think we're
It failed.
It failed.
Well, let me, procedurally, I'll ask the city. Yeah.
No, it was to
We need
postpone the
we
legislation.
need you to use your
voted-
mic
you
so
can't
everybody
vote
can
for it,
follow.
you're
But
abstaining.
I believe at any time you can vote to withdraw
You
the
can't vote on
entire
that
piece of
either if you're
legislation, which got voted down. So now we're back to Amendment 1. It's been moved and seconded by Alderwoman Finlayson. Yeah, Alderman Kirby seconded. So I wanted to go back to the section A through G. I had a question on number G because I have some concerns, but I wanted to keep an open mind. How would this affect when you say already planned or approved? So take Rocky Gorge, for example. I don't know if we had adequate facility, well, we definitely didn't for schools back then, but if that development was to come forward, does this amendment say that that would be exempt?
No.
I don't even know if that school is ever capacity or not.
Well,
Are you following what I'm saying?
yes, I mean, specific to Rocky Gorge, it was not subject to Title 22, and all they're going back through is an amended plan development. They would not be subject to the bill because that wasn't part of their plan review process.
So what is
So-
Amendment G?
So what amendment? So I'm not going to have to say that sure because, I mean, there are planned developments that are not subject to APF, okay? And they do not get a certificate of adequacy. You have Thomas Woods that was 10 units. It was not subject to APF, but it was a planned development. So if they have a certificate of adequacy, that is the thing that they get associated with their plan development, with their subdivision approval, or with anything that, any special exception that is approved by any of the boards associated with the Department of Planning and Zoning and or the Planning Department, okay? So there are major subdivisions that have APF and there are plan developments that have APF. Those all get a certificate of adequacy. So at the same time that typically we get agency review, and that's done at the time in which we submit it to the Board of Appeals or to the Planning Commission or prior to us approving it administratively. So they would all get a certificate of adequacy, any one of those types of development, a plan development or a special exception. So it's sort of redundancy, but I mean, I'm not quite sure where there would be a special exception that did not get a certificate of adequacy if it was subject to APF. Does that make sense?
Clarifying question. The language proposed in G by Alderwoman Finlayson, does that exempt any project that wouldn't have already been exempt by the original language?
That's what I'm saying. I don't believe so. I can't think of a scenario, and maybe I'm missing something, but if they get a certificate of adequacy, that is something that is associated with Title 22, but I can tell you from a practical standpoint, you don't get that. You get that simultaneously with your plan development and or subdivision or special exception.
If I could follow up then, on proposed F, the boundaries of well, first of all, to Alderwoman Finlayson, the language that you read was slightly different than the language that we have before us. Did you intend to read the language that was before us?
Say that again, I'm not hearing you.
The language that we have before us on paper for F is not the exact words that you used. Should we, when you made the motion, you referred to at West Street, I think you said area, and you skipped the words opportunity. Was that just an oversight, or were you changing the amendment?
My amendment is as I read it, which is on the paper in front of you.
It was different. So if you intended to, if we should take the motion as what is written before us, that would just be helpful. You didn't read it word for word. That's all I'm trying to clarify.
Okay, maybe I didn't finish reading it.
No,
But it is as it's written.
Okay.
My assumption was, and I did talk to Mr. Gutwall about this, that all developments, and I was thinking of Rocky Gorge, which was in existence before we had an APF, would not be applicable. And so I didn't want us in a position to be requiring an APF for projects that didn't require one at the time they came into the system.
Okay, now I understand. That she's making it completely clear that even though we looked at it saying it wasn't subject, it's completely clear in the law that it's not subject, whether anybody believes it would be or not. Is that okay?
So that's for G, you're saying it would not. It adds clarity, but doesn't add anything
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand where she's coming from. Not
For
another
F,
project.
do you have a map? So for F, do you have a map of the area that's referenced here so we could see?
It's in the 2009 comprehensive plan. It's the.
Can you
it's
describe
the
it?
opportunity areas. It's the 4 opportunity areas. This is one of them.
Can you describe it?
It's just west of Westgate Circle and goes all the way out to Dorsey Road and includes some of the area around Chinkopin Round Road and those areas. I mean, when we're currently going through the upper West Street sector study right now, and that's the area that we're focused on as to, what zoning changes will be made, what improvements need to be, what are our priorities for objectives and strategies to do better planning and land community development in that area. So it's generally from Westgate out towards Dorsey Road and Old Solomon's.
Thank you.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Thank you. In thinking about this F and the boundaries of the outer West Street, obviously, as we've been discussing this for the last couple of months, I offered an amendment earlier tonight to deal with sort of the inner West Street and the Arts and Entertainment District and the Main Street. And we've spent some time trying to hash out all the references to that in the code and what previous city councils have obligated us to make a commitment to. In thinking about the 2009 comp plan and my understanding of it, as you said, there's 4 different zones across the city.
Opportunity areas, yeah.
Why are we doing this one and not all 4 of them? I mean, if that's the maker of the, yeah.
My thinking was because that's a core area for the county. Our other areas, opportunity areas, are not contiguous to the county.
So because it bumps up against where the
Right.
county already has the system.
Exactly.
I see. Okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
Any other discussion from my colleagues? All right, so we're going to take these amendments one at a time. So all in favor of Amendment 1, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No. Roll call. Well, we can take
I was going to say, I think we need a roll call vote.
Mayor Panladies?
No.
Alderman Littman?
No.
Alderman Kirby?
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
No.
Alderman Arnett?
No.
Alderman Bud? Alderman Keown? Alderman Pindell Charles?
No.
Alderman Finlay?
Aye.
Motion's defeated. On to Amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2 speaks to and I consider it more of a technical amendment. The original language was testing for adequate school capacities, and I changed the language to the creation of a school utility chart. And specifically, as Mr. Gutwall has already provided us with the first one. So I thought it should be consistent with what we have. And the second, letter B, the school utility utilization chart shall be prepared by the Director of Planning and Zoning as described below.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Alderman Budge?
My initial comment is going to be largely a technical one. Is paragraph A, and this is for Alderman Littman, is paragraph A here one of the paragraphs that we struck out in our earlier amendment?
I don't think it is. That, let me just give me a second. I was checked that before. No, that was on page 7A. So it was not.
Thank you.
The paragraph A we did amend to add the January 1. The existing language had July 1 only, and so that was one of the amendments. We amended it only to add January 1.
Could you say that one more time for the difference between the two?
Sure. I'm sorry, I initially didn't speak into the microphone. The page 6, line 3942 refers to section 22-25-040 standards. In the amendments that we had just done through the Littman-Arnett amendments, we kept that paragraph A, but we added a reference to January 1. I see in Alderwoman Finlayson's amendments, the underline is actually reverse. In her amendments, July 1 is underlined as if that's the new language, but it's not. January 1 is the addition, not July 1.
I'm going to speak out of turn right here. I got something I really want to say. I think since I've been on this council, I've afforded everyone councilmatic courtesy. And I think when there's a piece of legislation that is introduced here, when it affects somebody's ward directly, it should be discussed with that person. At the very least, it should not be voted on by members of this body. I am very disappointed, extremely disappointed by some of my colleagues here. And I know I'm speaking out of turn, but I can't sit here and say any more about it. I don't do that, and all of these folks on this dais know that. When it's councilmatic courtesy and it's an issue that affects that ward, I make sure that I talk to the person or persons of the wards that it affects. And I think tonight I was not given that respect. And that's all I've got to say.
First of all, Alderwoman, I'm sorry that you feel that way. This was not in any attempt to do anything behind your back or do anything that would be contrary to what you have indicated. You have told all of us that you were abstaining from this piece of legislation from day one. So I am sorry that I did not approach you today when I finished these amendments at 5:30 today.
And you're correct. I did say I was going to abstain, but I didn't see this one. So I couldn't know. I'm looking at it for the first time, and I understand sometimes things get proposed later on, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But when it directly affects one person's ward, and we've got some other issues going on in Ward 3, and we back up against the county, I have to be extremely careful in what goes on in Ward 3 as it also goes on in the county. We're bordered from the west and from the south. And that gives my ward a little different composition than everybody. And everybody's ward is special, don't get me wrong. And I did indicate I would abstain. But this is the first time I've laid eyes on this. And if anybody takes offense, it's no disrespect, but I gotta say what I gotta say. Thank you very much.
I would have to say, this is the first time I had seen this legislation. And as you know, working with me in the past, I'm a big believer in councilmatic courtesy, and I didn't know it was your intention to vote for this amendment. One of the challenges of being mayor is that I vote first on everything, so I don't get a chance to see how everybody else votes. So I'm sorry if I offended you in that regard. Any other discussion?
Well,
Alderman Arnett?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need some help in understanding what this change means. That we're talking about testing for adequacy, which is a test, and this is talking about creating a utilization chart. Is that a test? I mean, I just don't know what we're doing here. Please help me.
Mr. Mayor, could we have Mr. Gutwall explain that it's synonymous, test or creation. Test in my mind means you have to do something other than gathering data. So that's why the creation of the chart. Mr. Gutwall.
I think it's nomenclature. It's just, it means the same thing. I think we're achieving the same goal. The idea is that there is a creation of a utilization chart, which is testing. That is what the utilization chart is doing. It is establishing the data and saying, here's the data at this point in time, and this is where it's open, this is where it's closed. I mean, I would turn to the attorney if this nomenclature could be interpreted somehow differently, but I think I think she's trying to clarify what what we mean by testing.
But the section talks about standards, and to me, that is some kind of test. Creating a chart, is that a test or not a test? I mean, it seems to me like we've changed the whole notion of what's going on here in establishing standards. A chart just simply says, here's what it is. It's not a test. So I think it really obviates the whole intent of this section in establishing standards. I mean, again, maybe I'm just not understanding. That's one of the reasons why it'd be nice to have had a little more time.
I wanted to follow with what Alderman Arnett said, because I want to make sure we all understand this. So the sheet that you provided today that lays out, and we got from the school system, that's the same sheet, right? So that's the same one going forward?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would be the school
So then
enrollment
what's
in 3
the
years.
test? I'm with him. I don't
Yeah.
understand what that is.
That's my terminology for when we test the standard. There's a level, these are all considered level of service standards. So whatever the standard is, 105, 110, 150, whatever it is, you would take the information on July 1st or January 1st of each year, you would plug it into the utilization chart, and where it hits those standards, if you will, then it's either it's open or closed. If it hits the standard, if it's above the standard, then the close. That's the test.
Got it.
Okay, July 1st and January 1st of every year.
That's fine. That's what we're doing.
Or the creation of the chart.
Alderman Bud, sure. We should have said creation of the chart. It would save us all a lot of...
Yeah, I think the creation of the chart is a specific way of performing the test. And a different way of performing the test is described in the Joint Working Group Committee's report. There are a number of different ways to do it. I don't think that we as a council have considered any of the various methods of performing the test. And without further examination of the questions, I don't think saying you must use this tool is necessarily the right way to go. I'm perfectly happy with you using the tool, but
who creates
I'm
it?
equally happy with you coming in a month from now and saying, no, that's all wrong. We need to follow the county checklist.
Arnett?
Who's creating this chart?
The department director of planning and zoning. But keep in mind, if you look back through the whole legislation, we talk about where the data is collected from, who provides that data, and how it is applied. So it's creating a utilization chart based on the information provided by the school board or the public school system.
Are we creating the chart to test the capacity?
Yes,
okay. So it seems to me like test is a critical word to keep here. Just creating a chart doesn't tell me anything about the standards or what we're doing with the chart. This certainly doesn't tell me who's creating the chart. So I would think that it would be X times a year the Planning and Zoning Department would develop a chart from information from the Board of Education to be used to test the adequacy or to establish a standard. I'm not sure that the existing language really got the job done either now that this has been raised, but it seems to me the whole point here is to perform a test. Where are we with relationship to the capacity of the schools? So,
Okay.
This may well be a fertile idea, and it could well be an improvement over what's in there now, but losing the testing notion and also having some clarity about who's creating the chart, probably, and how. I find the stuff that we got today from the school board, the newest stuff, to be very disconcerting in the radical change that seems to have happened from the last set of data. And so I'd like to have a little more comfort about who's creating this, what are we doing with it, and I don't think this amendment goes to speaking to that. So are we creating a school is the Department of Planning and Zoning creating a school utilization chart to test the adequacy of schools in terms of their capacity? Is that
Yes.
what we're really saying here?
That's exactly what
I think we're drowning in a pail of water. So I think exactly what you said is true, which is Pete's creating a chart, and he's going to plug in numbers that say 105, 110, 120, whatever we pick, and he'll test it with the numbers we get from the school system.
So
and
I'd
it'll
like
say
to-
open or it'll say closed.
Right.
I'd like the code to say that rather than this ambiguity.
What would you like it to say? Because I think
I would like it to say something along the orders, if I'm understanding this fully, that the Department of Planning and Zoning will create a school utilization chart to test the adequacy of the schools in the Annapolis feeder district. Something like that, if I'm fully understanding the concept we're talking about here. But it's ambiguous, either way is ambiguous, but the notion of test or providing some measure of adequacy is what this whole ordinance is about. So it could be test, it could be to show the adequacy or inadequacy. I mean, just something to make it clear what's going into this standard section.
yes, sir.
Back in the original ordinance, 03615, in language that we did not change at all, if you go to page 5 of the ordinance, it refers to the procedures that the director will use. Each of the directors that the various pieces of APF forward the results to the director of planning and zoning. You get to the findings and conclusions on from page 5 going into page 6. At the top of page 6 of the underlying ordinance, line 2, is where you get to the testing part. If a director determines that the facilities under review are or will be adequate for a proposed project, such findings are forwarded to planning and zoning. And C, if a director determines that one or more facilities is or will not be adequate for a proposed project, the applicant may proceed in this other way under the requirements of 2228.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say. You're taking some of these amendments out of context. If you read it through the entire bill itself, whether you say creation of a chart or you call it testing, that is the implication of it, that is what will occur.
So I'm thinking that the amendment actually, it's not, I don't like having to quickly evaluate this, but as
Why don't, if you don't mind, why don't we take a 10-minute break? I usually like to call a break around 9, give a chance for people to get a drink, go to the bathroom, and then we can come back to this.
Okay.
So we'll meet back here in 10 minutes.
You have to know this is about the marriage.
The council is now back in session. So, to go back, we're on Amendment 2 from Alderwoman Finlayson. And I would say, if you want to say something, I think the city attorney's worked something up that would answer everybody's question. So,
Okay.
Mr. City Attorney, if you...
Okay. Well, I think I know what, I'm pretty sure I know what Alderwoman Finlayson's trying to say here. And we're talking about Section A and Section B. I gotta find my thing. So I would leave Section B alone. I think it adequately states there that the director has to prepare a school utilization chart for testing purposes twice a year. And the chart is created with figures that he has provided, and he creates the chart. Mr. Gutwald, if this is correct, would you be creating the chart before July 1st and before January 1st each year?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So the chart's simply used for testing purposes, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I think we can leave A alone, but at the end of paragraph A, I would add, that's where you can add that the Department of Planning and the Director of Planning and Zoning would create a school utilization chart for testing purposes before such dates each year. And so that, I think Alderwoman Finlayson gives you the, what I think you want, and that is that there be a school utilization chart used for testing purposes each year, twice a year. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but I think that's what you're trying to do.
That's exactly what it was just semantics. It's gone into
Yeah.
another whole realm now, but
So I think if we just add that one sentence in Section A at the end and leave Section B alone, I think you'll get what you're looking for, and that is simply at the end of paragraph A, the Director of Planning and Zoning shall create a school utilization chart for testing purposes before such dates each year. Is that okay with you, Mr. Gutwald? It is semantics. But
Is there a motion to adopt the semantics amendment from the City Attorney?
So moved.
sorry.
Let the sponsor. So just so we're clear, on Amendment 2 from Alderwoman Finlayson, we're going to be adopting the language that he just said.
We're amending the amendment.
Amending the amendment, yes. So is there any other discussion on that?
I think what you're doing is just
Into letter A, correct.
I think what you're doing is, what I just did was amend Section A by adding that one sentence at the end, but leave Section B as is. That's because I think Section B is exactly what Alderwoman Finlayson, I think you're looking for. When I reread it, I think that's what you're looking for, and that's what Alderman Ornett had suggested. So I think that does it.
I think you got it.
Barring any other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstaining?
Abstain.
Amendment 3 is simply a phrase added to the end of letter C, page 7, line 4.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, it's not just, I'm trying to think of what I did was to break it down into a subsection under C. Putting a semicolon, actually that's what Alderman Littman had done. So I'm simply adding from the date of determination is made at the end of that subsection.
It looks here that it's taken it to 110 from 105.
Well, no, it takes it, I'm sorry, it takes the capacity to 110% of the state-rated capacity within 3 years from the date the determination is made.
Okay.
That's what's different.
Gotcha.
It's not in bold, I'm
Doesn't
afraid.
it also strike number 2? That's not.
And it strikes,
That's not in the Lippman Arnett.
Can't hear you.
It also looks to strike number 2, the section dealing with high schools. It's not in the one
There
we've
is no
already
number
approved.
2 in the original language. In the amendment, there is. So if you look at Jared's amendment, there is a 2, and he has struck the 2. And it's
No,
just,
I haven't struck the 2. You're striking paragraph 2. You're striking the reference to the high school.
I'm just adding from the date and changing
That-
the 110. And your original had 110. You changed it to 105 in your. Did you not?
Your amendment proposes to remove the high schools from the test, and by striking paragraph 2, your amendment also proposes to change the test from within 3 years, which would be years 1, 2, and 3, to just in year 3. So
Right.
that is a significant change at the end of paragraph 1 that I had discussed with Director Gutwald in considering making the same amendment, and Director Gutwald advised against it. So I did not include that amendment in my package.
Okay, I guess I'm confused between the several documents.
Mm-hmm.
This amendment does take out the high school completely, adds the percentage, changes the percentage to 110, and as opposed to determining each year, it's at 3 years.
Correct. Your amendment proposes to do those 3 things.
Yes.
Is there a motion to adopt? Is there a second?
Second. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I thought I moved it.
Just forgot to do that at the beginning. All right, so to discussion.
I guess I'm just curious why all these 3 pretty significant pieces are put together in one amendment when you broke out some of the other stuff into other amendments. Why did you choose to do it that way?
Well, I was just trying to use the language that we had, the original language as well as the amended language, as opposed to separating them out. It was all in one paragraph in Alderman Lippman's legislation, so I simply tried to. Would you rather separate the amendments out?
I just wanted to see what sort of I get that 1 and 2 under C would be together, I guess. So
Well,
D, I guess, is an added section. Okay.
D
Thank
is
you.
separate. We're just on C right now. I
Is it?
can.
It says
It is
all
part of
under Amendment 3.
It is part of the same amendment, but we're talking about C right now. The justification for the high school, particularly, Annapolis High School serves young people from any number of other feeder systems. It is a magnet school for the arts. It is a special center for English second language kids. It's a international baccalaureate school, and I suspect there are a couple of others that I've lost at this moment. They pull, young people from all over the county, more so in the lower part, half of the county, but nevertheless from all over the county. They are not all Annapolis residents. The school system, however, does not delineate out which young people are Annapolis residents and who are not. So their numbers are artificially increased because of the influx of kids from other high schools. So is it fair for us to count the population that comes from Broadneck and Chesapeake and South River and Southern? Because they're all students at Annapolis High School. So the fairer way to consider that is to not consider the high school, to continue to consider the elementary and the middle schools, because we know they are all Annapolis residents.
Thank you. First, I'll take the small change about switching from testing at year 3 versus the current language, which has tests at years 1, 2, and 3. And again, I want to make the point that I'm following the direction and guidance of our Director of Planning and Zoning, which we frequently hear around this dais is what we should be doing. And Director Gutwald, I invite you to comment on the difference there, since that was your advice to me.
Is your mic on?
Sorry. The difference is that if it currently is over capacity, or next, the first year it's over capacity, you wouldn't be shutting down an area, because in 3 years it may be, may not be over the rated capacity, and we may not know what that rationale is. So you're looking, the idea behind an APF is growth management. You're looking to look out for the projections anytime in that time, and projections can go up and down as you may or may not see. So you're always looking at a planned type of growth activity, and that's why you would look at any time in that period. Why would you allow growth to continue if it's currently over capacity, with no planned rationale, no planned improvements or redistricting to occur? That's sort of the rationale is why you would have any of the years in that 3-year projection included in the testing.
Thank you. Obviously, the change from 105 to 110, I talked about earlier. I still feel the same way. Regarding taking out paragraph 2, taking out the high school, what message would we be sending to our city residents that are high school students by saying we don't care enough about the size, the capacity of the building you're going to for your education? You're already having to get up at 5:30 in the morning, whatever time it is, to show up at 7:15 start times. You're in an overcrowded school, but we're not going to evaluate that, just like we are trying to take care of finally our elementary and middle school kids. I just find it irresponsible to take out the high school.
Um, 20% over capacity is 20% over capacity. I don't care how you get there, and I don't think we should sanction, I don't believe we should sanction any overcapacity, but I was willing to live with 120% because of the factors Alderwoman Finlayson outlined, but to just take it out altogether, again, I just don't think that's being responsible to the children.
Did we vote earlier to take it to 120%? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Do you want to, before we go, do you want to vote on these one by one or as a group?
I'm sorry?
Would you like to vote on them one-on-one or as a group?
We can vote on them one-on-one, that's fine.
It's your discretion. Alderman Budge?
Yeah, I think regarding the high school question, it's kind of a fundamental principle that you can't put 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag. And it doesn't matter who's trying to put the extra students into the high school. If too many students are in there, it's not an acceptable condition. And just because the school board or the county with their exemptions in the adequate public facilities is saying it's okay, load her up. One of the principles we were taught as kids is just because somebody else is doing something wrong doesn't make it right. So I think excluding the high school from this bill is wrong on a number of fronts.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take that piece first, the high school piece then. And I would remind us that this legislation isn't going to impact one way or another what the school system does. So while it sounds like it's going to, from our perspective, have a great impact, it will not. It's up to the school system. And whether we put 105 or 110%, they make their decisions irregardless of what is going on in our city, unfortunately. So we're not being irresponsible, and we have many, many, many other opportunities to support our school system, and we're not doing all of those other things we could be doing. This is one piece of legislation that should not hamstring the city, but it should give us an opportunity to assist, and at the same time, we should be doing some other things to help our young people. So, we're still considering the elementary schools. We have more of those, far more. And we have 2 middle schools. And maybe the concern now is that all these schools aren't closed. The original chart showed most of them closed. Now that they're not closed, they don't create as much of a problem, which is a good thing. So I'd like to take a vote on the high school exemption piece.
You'd like to take that vote first? Sure.
Point of order, just to be clear, we're only voting on paragraph C, paragraph 2 right now. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. So the three votes, as I have it, would be the elementary and middle schools, the 110, the high school, and then the 3-year rule is how it would be broken out.
And then we
correct?
still have paragraph D after that.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
exactly.
Just
Right. And so we're on the high school one right now. Okay. So all those in favor of exempting the high school, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Roll call.
Abstain.
Roll call vote.
Mayor Panelidis,
Aye.
Alderman Lippman,
No.
Alderman Kirby,
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
No.
Alderman Payne,
No.
Alderman Finlayson, I'm sorry, Alderman Kendall Charles,
Abstain.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Fails on a tie vote. Fails on a tie vote. Take the next one.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles abstained, so the vote was 4-4. A 4-4 vote is defeated.
Okay, the next one, paragraph B, deals with the utilization chart.
I
Which,
think we have to,
I'm sorry?
Didn't you want to go back to paragraph 1?
Let's go back to paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 is what changes the capacity to 110% of state capacity and 3 years from the date of determination.
So then we're taking the 110% and the 3 years together, or separate?
No, there's only one change in this, and that is to strike within and add
No, but
from the
I
date
think
of determination.
went up
I was
from
saying at the
105 to
Alderwoman's request,
110.
we wanted to break it down to the high school if we're going from 105 to 110, and then if we're going to make it the 3 years instead of the 1. Right.
Did we not pass the first amendment
No.
of Jared's that goes to 105?
Yes, right now it's at 105, and within 3 years, you're proposing to change the 110, the 105 to go up to 110, and you're proposing to change within 3 years to in 3 years. Are you making the motion to do those two things right now?
We could do the 110%.
Okay. So everybody's clear, this is to take it, which, as you had originally proposed, which was 110, and then today you put it to 105. So to go back to the 110% for elementary and middle schools. So everybody's clear on that? Right. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Abstain?
Abstain.
Roll call.
Roll call vote.
Mayor Panelidis,
Aye.
Alderman Lippman,
No.
Alderman Kirby,
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer,
No.
Alderman Arnett,
No.
Alderman Bose,
No.
Alderman Payne,
No.
Alderman Pendle Charles,
Abstain.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Motion is defeated.
Motion's defeated. Okay, to the third one, which changes.
Mr. Mayor, based upon what Mr. Gutwall has explained to me over and over, I will withdraw the
Okay.
third one.
Was that the last one then?
Yes, no, letter D.
Oh, letter D, correct.
Okay.
Letter D, page 7, lines 11 and 12. There's an error in your handout. Should be lines 11 and 12. And it says that the utilization chart shall include the following and shall not vary in substance from the information included in the Anne Arundel County Educational Facilities Master Plan unless the variation is confirmed in writing by the Superintendent of the Board of Education or approved by resolution of the City Council. That means that if there are changes made to the utilization chart, those changes must be agreed upon either by the Superintendent and Board of Ed or by this council.
So, point of clarification, this amendment would just replace the first two lines in D? It doesn't change 1, 2, or 3 below it?
It's just D. Just D, not the 1, 2, 3 under D. They remain.
Yeah, so it takes out capacity of school use blah, 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 semicolon, and substitutes this amendment.
Correct.
I move that amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Alderman Lippman?
Can we have Director Gutwald speak to the advisability of this amendment?
I'm reading through it as we speak. Included in the legislation was specific things that we would take into consideration as we did the utilization chart. And these are the things that the school board takes into consideration when they do their educational facilities master plan. The one thing I have concern about is that since we have testing done twice a year, the educational facilities master plan only comes out once a year. So we have a conflict with some of the amendments that have already been made with the fact that we'd be testing January 1st based on new school enrollments. No educational facilities master plan has been adopted or proposed by the superintendent or by the Board of Education. So that's what I was just double checking. Everything that they include in their educational facilities plan is itemized under item D, so I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but my problem was with the two testing dates if we are only pointing to one document.
So what would
off
you
the top
suggest?
of my head. I'm sorry?
I said, what would you suggest?
May I ask a question?
Or other documentation provided by the Board of Education. I mean, I'm gonna have to go to the Board of Education, their facilities people, and ask them for their September 30th enrollment and projections as they submitted to the state. That may not be in their adopted educational facilities plan, but they do provide, they have that. I mean, my experience, they would have that information because they have to submit that down in late fall to the state, so we could get that information.
So, by example, if Annapolis High School chose to extrapolate out all of the kids that went to various or assigned to various other high schools, would that be a change in the utilization chart that would thus require either an action by the superintendent and board and this council? Because that's what I was thinking.
No, I don't think that's not what I was getting at, and what I think this is getting at. What we're getting at is if they found new information or they changed something in the educational facilities plan, would change the capacity of the building, which could be what you're talking about, but that would have to be a physical change in the building itself in order for them to modify their educational facilities master plan. You know.
So do you think that this is not necessary, not appropriate? I'm not clear on your objection to the language.
I don't have necessarily objection. I think the issue is that the following shall not vary in substance from information included in the Anne Arundel County Educational Facilities Master Plan. That's very specific to a document that's adopted July 1st of every year by the Board of Education. We have included an amendment that would include data starting January 1st from the September 30th enrollment that would not necessarily be in that Educational Facilities Master Plan. That's what I'm getting at.
Alderwoman Finlayson, perhaps if we reference just the first testing, the July 1 testing should not vary. Insert July 1 testing should not vary.
Would that make a difference?
Well, I was going to suggest or other documentation provided by the Board of Education, which would be the enrollment submitted in January.
Well, I guess I have a new concern, and that is that we are adding other qualifiers that the school board is not adding. Anyway?
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. The comma after that, the variation is confirmed in writing by the school board. That would clean that up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sorry, I'm reading on the fly.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm reading on the fly, comparing what was there. And
So if somebody could give just a very quick overview of the amendment one more time.
Well, my intent and what it says is that the school utilization chart can't be changed, new information can't be added unless the superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools or the Board of Ed or this body agrees to consider that new information.
Okay. That's fine.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Now, we want to, you know,
I don't think we should be working on changes on the fly like this. I don't think this is an important enough change that we need to make this amendment. Director Gutwald is going to be using the information from the schools during the July 1 test, and for the January 1 test, he's still going to be using information from the schools. I don't see where we have the need to insert this. If down the road, we'll make changes to the code here and anywhere else where there's issues. If it comes back where there's greater clarity needed or changes needed, subsequent legislation, I think, is the answer to this provision.
Director Gutwald, do you have any comments?
I have none. I understand the intent. I guess, to me, what's in that educational facilities master plan is what I have itemized on letter D. All that information is part and parcel to what they do in their educational facilities master plan. I think Alderman Finlayson is just saying that none of that information can be altered at any point in time without some oversight. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, I have no problems.
Okay.
Simply for clarity and transparency.
Got it.
Director Gutwald, but like you said, it would hinder your ability to update the information for the January 1 test.
Well, as I read further, she said unless the variation is confirmed in writing and by the superintendent. So January 1st, I would ask the school board to confirm that this information has changed. I would probably do that anyways because those would be the numbers I would be utilizing in the January 1st test. So unless the variation is confirmed in writing by the superintendent, I think that could be the documentation that I could use.
Would you be getting it from the superintendent or someone under him?
Well, it would probably be under the superintendent, but I would ask for that signature, yeah.
Would having a superintendent or his designee be appropriate because you might actually not be getting it from the superintendent?
Correct. That would be easier for me.
Any objection to the friendly amendment?
I think that would be protocol anyway.
So I move to amend the amendment by adding the words "or his designee" following the word "superintendent."
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
The ayes have it.
That was only for the amendment to the amendment.
That's correct, yes. So is there a motion to adopt the amendment as amended?
I'll move the amendment.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
All right. Is that the last of the amendments? Does anyone else have any?
Mr. Mayor,
Going once, going twice? I hope you're joking.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve O3615 as amended.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Is there a motion to adopt O3615 on third reader? Is there a second?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady.
Aye.
Alderman Littman.
Aye.
Alderman Kirby.
No.
Alderman Piper.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is that a no?
Alderman Bush.
It's nine.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Abstain.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I wore my celebratory tie for a reason.
Mr. Mayor, point of
It's got
personal
fireworks on it.
point of
Only took
personal
the city
privilege, if I may.
300 years. Go ahead.
Just briefly, I would like to thank the council, staff, members of the public, but in particular, Alderman Arnett. I want to express appreciation. All work that any of us do builds on previous work done, and I know you worked on this before I joined the council, and you were supportive of my work on this throughout, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, but of course, we have a lot of people on the council to thank, so I think we should congratulate ourselves together.
Everybody pat themselves on the back.
Yeah.
Great. All right, let's move on to the next item. Mr. City Attorney?
The easy one.
Mr. Mayor, next, on second reader, ordinance, an ordinance having to do with business licenses, taxes, and regulations for the purpose of addressing matters having to do with peddlers, hawkers, and itinerant merchants within the city.
Is there a motion to adopt Ordinance 0816 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a motion to amend 0816 on second reader?
So, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have two amendments. One is the Economic Matters and Rules and City Government proposed amendments, and the second is the proposed budget amendment. So I'll let Economic Matters and then Rules speak to the amendments.
Must we? Fred? No. All right. Well, there's several amendments, Mr. Mayor, and everyone, all of you people in TV land. Oh, God, I dread going through this. The First Amendment is fairly straightforward. It's removing Department of Neighborhood and Environmental Programs and replacing it with planning and zoning.
Great. Is there a motion to adopt the amendment?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion, Alderman Budge?
Point of discussion, the Economic Matters and Rules Committees discussed these amendments at great length. And I would like to suggest that perhaps we may wish to consider them as a group.
Yes.
I'll second that.
I couldn't agree more.
All right. Great.
They've been very thoroughly hashed out.
There. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
On
Thank
to the
you
budget
all.
amendment.
All right. Now we'll move on to the proposed budget amendment.
Yes, these proposed budget amendments, there are two of them. I circulated the draft amongst the council members yesterday. And they center around the 30-minute rule for mobile vendors. We learned in the course of discussion during the last week or so that the permitting office has been licensing mobile vendors in residential areas with the same 30-minute rule that has been applied to the food trucks, even though that's not exactly what the code says. But in the principle of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is relevant throughout this ordinance, to trying to bring the code in line with what our present practice is. The Amendment 1 here introduces the 30-minute rule, except in Eastport, in residential areas for mobile vending to be consistent with present practice. I have also added language at the request of enforcement to be more specific about when and how the 30-minute rule applies. At the moment, the language just says 30 minutes at a location and doesn't say anything about how far a vendor has to move, when they can come back, anything like that. And so the proposal is that the vendor may not remain in a neighborhood longer than 30 minutes during a 6-hour period, except within the boundaries of Ward 8. And so moved.
A second.
Thanks.
As one who will potentially not be affected by this legislation, I would observe that the 30-minute rule is tantamount to eliminating these kinds of businesses by and large, but if that's the will of the council, so be it.
We discussed this at lunch, and my only concern would be for ice cream trucks. So what is the time limit that they can go for 30 minutes. So residential parking's 2 hours within a day. Is that 30 minutes in a 24-hour period, or?
What this amendment specifies, and it's a number that we can adjust if we so choose, is 30 minutes within a 6-hour period, which in the hours that they're allowed to operate, functionally that means twice a day. We had, for ice cream trucks, I did a small survey of pool moms and dialing back to when our kids were at that age. And the pool we went to, the ice cream trucks came around once a day. So twice a day seems like a nice plus. But I understand that's not universal, and I'm open to the input of my colleagues.
I feel like I know what Jared's going to say because we go to the same pool, and I definitely don't want to be the mayor to come between kids and their ice cream. So if there was a way we could, soften that up a little bit, I'd certainly entertain it. Alderman Littman?
I move to amend the reference to 6 hours to be 3 hours.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Alderman Budge and I spoke this morning, I guess it was, about this, and we discussed this new amendment because there are problems with goodie buses that come and park for extended periods. And I spoke to Chief Priestoop, and his big concern was with 30 minutes, they would park for 30 minutes, drive around the block, and come back and park again. And so Alderman Budge and I came up with every 6 hours. Actually, we talked about it, he came up with it, because that gives ice cream trucks twice a day. And we thought twice a day, as opposed to your proposal would be 3 times a day. Twice a day was more amenable.
So I thought about that, but my thinking is that, at least in my household, I wouldn't be letting my kids get ice cream that early in the morning. So if the kids are going to the pool by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, buy them a cone, and the kids who are going later in the afternoon, get them a cone. So I'm thinking it's going to, as a practical impact, it's going to be more like a 2 o'clock and a 5 o'clock occurrence.
Well, the permits allow them to begin at 9 in the morning, I believe, and they have to end, I think it's at 8 in the evening. So we were calculating they'd come early afternoon and again, later in the evening, and that would be the 6-hour range. So you're saying you want them to come at noon, at 4, and at 8?
That's a possibility, yes. I'm thinking the younger kids getting the ice creams, they're not at the pool at 8 o'clock at night, but the ice cream truck can go back for the whatever teenagers are there. But kids should have 2 bites at the apple, in my mind. If they miss the 1 o'clock ice cream truck, and they're
summer, they're out of school.
2 bites at the ice cream truck.
Yeah. But they're not there for 6 hours.
I know.
Yeah.
But that truck obviously doesn't play the music.
So, if I recall correctly, Alderman Littman had made an amendment and seconded to take it from 6 hours to 3 hours. So, all in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Now, voting on the amendment as a whole.
Yes.
All those in favor of the amendment, actually, is there a motion to adopt the amendment as amended?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I'll say no. Abstain. Just because I think you should be able to sell ice cream 24/7.
And so, well, actually, that we just dealt with the mobile vendors.
Right.
Amendment 2 deals with the food trucks and ice cream vendors, and inserts the same language about neighborhood. And instead of 6 hours, I would offer it as a 3-hour period.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt that amendment? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Correct. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Yes, we do.
That was number 2.
Is there a motion to adopt 0816 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt 0816 on third reader?
So moved.
Is there a second? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panley.
No.
Okay. Alderman Lippman.
Yes.
Alderman Kirby.
Pass.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Yes.
Alderman Arnett.
I feel I must follow my mayor. Aye.
I voted no.
Okay. Alderman Best.
Aye.
Alderman Payne.
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Charles.
Aye.
Alderman Finley.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the corresponding resolution on peddlers, hawkers, and itinerant merchants regarding fees and fines.
Is there a motion to adopt R02-16 on second reader?
So moved.
All right. Is there a motion to amend R02-16 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have one amendment, and that is the Budge proposed amendment. I'll let the sponsor speak to it at this time.
Certainly. As soon as I find it. We received, actually there are two amendments, one to fees and one to fines. We received a number of comments during the public hearing and during the subsequent committee meeting that the fees and fines, mostly the fees as originally proposed, were unworkably high. The director, not the director, the manager of economic development did some market research in our peer geographies, other areas around here, and determined the going rate for vendors at events, and worked up a fee schedule that is competitive with areas around us, that results in no net change in revenues to the city. And that is what's contained in these fees and fines amendments. So with the, and in brief, we have one application fee for one size application fee for everybody. The expediting fee, we don't have any add-ons for how many folks you've got or anything like that. The license fees are simplified down to $35 for 30 days, $300 a year, and a group rate of $15 a day per 150 vendors for special events.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt that? Is there a
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
And then the second amendment is for fines, and it's reducing the fine for the initial offense from $100 to $55, mostly for the benefit of being able to have an increase for the second offense.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there
So,
a
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Lippman made some kind remarks earlier, and I would like to make some same kinds of remarks for Alderman Budge. This was a thankless chore. It was a lot of work, and I would say that in addition to all the hard work he put into it, Alderman Budge made it very easy for us to follow these changes by giving us excellent charts that talked about the legislation, the change in the legislation, and the rationale, and it really sets a model that I think we will want to follow in the future, so I appreciate that work.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to also give some recognition to Kerry Berger in the law office.
Absolutely.
Who worked with Alderman Budge endlessly, it seemed like, over a long period of time, and got the language down. It was not easy to do.
She's been working on this for 2 years.
Yeah, so she deserves a lot of credit too.
Gets a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Making history today.
Yes.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt R 0216 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panalidi?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Aye.
Alderman Kirby?
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Bud?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Phillips?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next is another second reader, O2416, regarding snow emergency routes.
Is there a motion to adopt O2416 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a motion to amend O2416 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second? We have one amendment. It's a Transportation Committee proposed amendments, and I'll let the sponsor speak to them at this time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council, the Transportation Committee recommends 3 amendments which actually work well as a group. The ordinance as written says that there shall be a fine for violating this section, but the section as it was written in the ordinance doesn't have anything to violate. So we rearranged the wording some to say it's a violation to leave your car on a snow emergency route, and then A and B, the police can tow it and they can find, and you can be fined for it. That's the gist of these amendments. So moved.
We vote on them in a group?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt O2416 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt O2416 on third reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panalidi?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Aye.
Alderman Kirby?
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Bud?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Phillips?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, next on second reader is a resolution, R2216, having to do with the annexed area, which is commonly referred to as Quiet Waters. It's actually the Annapolis Neck Road property annexation and public facilities agreement status. It's one of the 4 resolutions that have previously been introduced.
Okay. Is there a motion
I
from
move.
the floor?
I move R2216.
Second. All right. Discussion? Alderman Arnett?
Mr. Mayor, the rules in city government, at least, if not others, took this up. I believe other committees did as well. And we had a discussion with former city attorney, Mr. Leahy, and with our current city attorney, and it appears that there was a critical agreement that was struck in 2012 that was not on the record, and once that agreement came to light, all parties agreed that this resolution is not appropriate, that the developer did what they were supposed to do, and the Rules Committee, at least, if not others, recommended that we vote this down as a way of disposing of it.
Any other discussion? Madam City...
Mayor, what's the motion on the floor?
There was a motion to adopt in second, and then once we say aye, it's going to be a roll call vote.
There wasn't a motion to vote no.
You're going to vote it down?
Yeah, I thought that was the motion, but I'm just
take that
checking.
back. Correct.
Motion was to support,
Was the motion
to adopt,
or to vote it down?
or reject.
Right. The motion was to adopt the resolution. The recommendation from the Rules Committee, and I believe others, was to vote it down because it's flawed in its construction.
So the motion on the table right now is to pass it, so we should have said to vote it down first.
The motion wasn't to pass it. It was, yeah.
It's to adopt and never vote no.
Oh, I got you. Okay. All right. Any other
No,
discussion?
you voted down.
So to be clear, if you vote no, it means you're voting it down. Which is
Correct.
what the rules committee suggested. Okay. Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Panelidis,
No.
Alderman Littman,
No.
Alderman Kirby,
No.
Alderman Pfeiffer,
No.
Alderman Arnett,
No.
Alderman Budge,
No.
Alderman Payon,
No.
Alderman Kendall Charles,
No.
Alderman Finley.
No.
The resolution's been defeated. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
That was a long wait for some people in the audience to get to this point.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The next item on the agenda is
It's a long wait for some people up here to get to this point.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's the last item on the agenda is the item that was removed from the consent calendar, which has to do with the community grants.
I have
Oh, yes.
no idea what you said.
I'll try again.
Community grants.
Only because you didn't hear me or because it was confusing?
No, because I didn't hear you.
Okay, the last item, I believe it's the last item on the agenda, has to do with the matter that was removed from the consent docket, which was the community grants. You're
Is
welcome.
there a motion to approve ID 299/16, revised community grant funding?
So moved.
Second.
All right. There is one amendment. It is the Littman amendment, and I will let the sponsor speak to it at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's, of course, a lengthy process of how we got here, and I'm not going to try to restate it all, because I think you all know. But in going through these numbers, I'm looking at a few of them, like Seeds for Success, who got $5,000 last year. They asked for $10,000 this year. This is an organization whose mission is guiding children living in Annapolis, public and subsidized housing, so they become healthy, successful adults. That's their mission statement from their own webpage. And I'd like to get them more money. Frankly, I would truly like to match their $5,000 that they got to last year. I welcome suggestions on how we can move money around to get them to $5,000. But as initial step, I propose moving $1,000 from the Chesapeake Children's Museum to Seeds for Success. The other change is under education programs for adults, and we obviously have been through a lot of discussions regarding Center for Help and OIC, but they've asked for just $10,000. I don't see why we would be giving them more than they've asked for. 10,000 is what we gave them last year. 10,000 is what they requested. I'm perfectly comfortable with this distribution of giving them 10,000 again, but I don't see why we would give them more than what they asked for. I don't want this to become another battle between Center for Help and OIC. Frankly, that extra 2,000 could go for two Seeds for Success, and that way they can get to $5,000. I'd be perfectly pleased with that change.
Do you want to do the amendments individually, or you would like to do them together?
Why don't we have some discussion first, and then we'll figure that out.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
The Finance Committee has spent some time with this list that's been prepared, and just for the benefit of some of our constituents who maybe haven't followed the process that carefully, in the last year or two, there has been a staff-driven committee that has representatives from a number of departments that deal with different facets of the community. They meet, they are in charge of the application process that Ms. Norman talked to earlier. They meet with a lot of the requesters. They go through the process of trying to rebalance the needs along the guidelines that we give them. 5 or 6 years ago, when I was first on the council, we were often doing a lot of these amendments, you know, can we take 5,000 here, can we take 10,000 there, horse trading, and I think the idea of having folks in our planning and zoning department who traditionally deal with social service organizations, we have folks in the mayor's office as well as in the finance department. We've built a much better system that has a lot more sort of responsiveness, and what the council is trying to do, the finance committee did during this year's process, has been to say, here is the dollar amount, we didn't like the dollar amount in the mayor's budget, tried to add more dollars amount, and asked them to go back, the people who've looked at it closely, and try and move the money around with the parameters we gave them. And I think the Finance Committee's attitude has been that they have done that work, and instead of trying to sort of at the 11th hour push around a couple of the lines, to sort of leave that process whole as the staff has presented to us. So that's certainly the attitude we took in when we considered this the Finance Committee. So I would definitely resist any amendments to it, no matter how well intended. So
I agree with you on that. Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And at the risk of getting a deluge of text messages, I subscribe to what Alderman Pfeiffer says, but also I have been a long follower and supporter and contributor to SEEDS. Because of our contributions, SEEDS has been very, very successful, and I think they'll always need our help, but I think it's one of those success stories where we've made contributions, gotten them going, and I've heard from them that they actually would like to see us support other endeavors, and they will never say no to money, but they do feel that there's other organizations that need the help, and certainly we have tried with the revisions here to help more organizations and broaden it. So again, I support the work of the committee and the allocations that they came up with. I know we did have discussion about OIH and the other one, and I think they're both very deserving. This is the recommendation of the committee, and they did work long and hard on it.
Alderman Pindell Charles?
Yes. Alderman Arnett, are you basically saying that Seeds for Success is comfortable with what the committee has proposed?
That's my understanding. We haven't talked about this rendition of it, but we talked about the earlier rendition, which was less money. And I think they are, again, I don't think they're trying to say we don't need your money. They'll always take it, and they'll always want our support. But they have been successful in their fundraising.
Yeah, I've been with them and followed them and done presentations with them from the beginning. And based on what you're telling us, that's extraordinarily admirable of them. I kudos to them for laying that out to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they're a very great group of people.
They are. Mm-hmm.
Alderman Pfeiffer, if you could help me understand the rationale for giving more to OIC than they requested.
Be happy to have and I think we have one representative of the committee here, but as I understand, there was sort of three different versions where we went back to them with more direction, largely giving them more funds to allocate. But I'm sure Nikki can speak to some of the logic of what changed in the two different lists.
Good evening, Nikki Pletzer, Finance Department.
Real close.
Okay, how's that?
Better, as close as possible to the mic.
Okay. So our decision to increase the funding to OIC was a direct result of their
Sorry, that's not close enough.
Of their funding, of the OIC funding, the CDBG funding being cut. So as you referenced, OIC requested $10,000. We suggested $12,000 as a form of compensation. I imagine they would have requested more had they known that their CDBG funding would have been cut drastically. So we were trying to even the playing field. They lost funding, and we were trying to restore some of that through the community grant process.
Let's vote on them all together. I think I see where this is going.
You need a second. Anybody second? All right. No second, then it dies.
Second.
All right. Nick of time. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed? No.
No.
The noes have it. Is there a motion to adopt ID 29916, revised community grant funding?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, thankfully, the agenda is completed, and you can accept a motion for adjournment.
Alderman Payne?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Discussion?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No discussion. Meeting adjourned.
Enjoy your month off.